the podcast at the Rick Smith.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. At a Geneva, Switzerland Public Sector Unions Conference, the Trade in Services Agreement, or TISA, got a lot of attention. You may never have heard of TISA. It's not surprising considering the secrecy in which the agreement affecting 70% of the world's trade in services is being negotiated. AFL-CIO Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist Celeste Drake told Canada's Radio Labour that TISA could have a huge impact on workers and the power of governments to legislate public services policy.
TISA and agreements like it do pose a real threat to workers and their families. The main problem is they are really made on the basis of corporate needs and desires, and it's what the corporations want. And when these agreements are made behind closed doors, where workers, consumers, environmental advocates, food advocates, public health advocates can't see the text, then we can't really have a strong impact on what the outcomes are. And then the corporate agenda gets advanced. And what happens is slowly, sort of agreement by agreement by agreement, the policy space for governments is diminished.
First student school bus drivers in Oakland, California are looking forward to their first work under a labor contract as Teamsters. The drivers voted to join Teamsters Local 853. 150 drivers transport students in the Oakland Unified School District. The drivers and monitors at First Student in Oakland will be covered by the Teamsters National Master Agreement with First Student.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. In a few hours, they're going to play Game 3 of the 2014 World Series, which maybe you've heard is for the championship of professional baseball. Or maybe you haven't heard that, because from looking at the all-important TV ratings, practically no one is watching the Fall Classic. In fact, the first two games between the San Francisco Giants and the Kansas City Royals had some of the worst ratings in World Series history. But it's not really surprising. Once called our national pastime, baseball has morphed into strictly a regional sport. Without a major market team in this series, it largely goes unnoticed. As it is now, even with the Cinderella Royals playing in their first series since 1985, against a Giants team that is trying to nail down their third title in the last 5 seasons. But unless you followed baseball this season, you probably have no idea that the two teams only qualified for the postseason as wildcard teams by first winning a one-game play-in playoff game. The Royals beat the A's to start what became a record 8-game winning streak, and the Giants deferred before going on to post-series wins against the Nationals and Cardinals. But here they are, each trying to win the World Series, if anyone cares to watch. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for work. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they're still right on. Oh, and this time is my time. Alright, love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to talk about, lots to get to. Inequality, Ebola, voting. Should people be voting? Should only wealthy white landowners be allowed to vote? Should young women be allowed to vote? These are the questions that we hear continually popping up, especially in the place known as fake news on Fox. I'm still mind blown that there would be somebody who would actually say that young women should not vote because, well, they just don't have life experience. I gotta be honest. I'm fearful when there are those who say that we need to be narrowing the number of people engaged in our political process. Just one of those things that jumps out at me. Also today, going to talk about what's going on in Metropolis, Illinois, the home of Superman. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about the folks of Metropolis, but I know only Superman could probably withstand one of the uranium leaks that I guess just happened last night. There was a leak of some sort, not a lot of information from the news media. The company has said, well, a little bit, it was a machine's fault, but no problem. It didn't leave the compound, except there was a video of it going into the air, but it didn't leave the compound because the air just stays. And it just amazes me at how simplistic our media thinks our thinking is. Well, if it just went up into the air, it's not anywhere else. So we'll talk about that and anything else you want to talk about. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. So the people at Wallet Hub, they have come out with a new one of their little studies that I like. I like looking at the things that they come up with and the way they throw numbers together. But they looked at the most and the least politically engaged states in the country, to which Pennsylvania, according to them, 32nd. So we're not at the bottom, but we're nowhere near the top in political engagement. I was surprised, actually, that Massachusetts, the most politically engaged state in the country, followed by Colorado, Minnesota, the District of Columbia, which isn't actually a state, but we'll give it to them anyway, Wisconsin, Maine, Iowa, and then Mississippi and Montana, which kind of surprised me. The Mississippi kind of surprised me. But when you stop and you think about, some of the races that they've had recently, where you've got all this racial tension stirring, where you're actually seeing, both sides getting out and voting because we're going to show them. And on the other side going, we're going to put them back into the 1900s. So interesting numbers. The highest percentage of registered voters, I was shocked, in the 2012 election was actually the highest percent of registered voters was Mississippi, followed by the District of Columbia and Minnesota, also North Carolina. And you go and you look at, why Mississippi and North Carolina, lots of engagement going on, lots of organizing. And I would argue in all of these states, lots of organizing. The least percentage of registered voters, Hawaii, Utah, Wyoming, Nevada, and Arizona. And Arizona kind of surprised me. But as I thought about it, I go, well, maybe not such a surprise. Maybe people are just going, just stop. Just stop. The highest number of folks who voted in the 2010 midterm elections turned out to be Maine, Washington, and Oregon. The least amount, Texas, Tennessee, Utah, which again, you kind of got to go, takes you all over the map. The highest percentage of citizens who voted in the 2012 presidential election, obviously they're counting the District of Columbia as a state. They were the highest, followed by Mississippi, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Massachusetts. The lowest percentage of people who turned out in the 2012 election, West Virginia, the lowest. Interesting numbers. And the other thing that got me is, you look at the per capita, the per capita income of folks, and put that next to voting registration and voting participation. And oddly enough, the states who are at the top of the per capita, the Washington, D.C., Massachusetts, Minnesota, Colorado, Delaware, Washington, Oregon, people near the top of the per capita income were also at the very top of the political engagement, which again takes me back to the higher your income, the more people are going to get out and vote. The lower the income, the more people are going to stay away and not be as engaged. And it bears out in this study that they've done. The southern states are, for the without Mississippi, because one of those things that just, and wow. But most of the southern states, you see the income, the per capita income down low, and political engagement down low. And it goes back to, the things that I've always said, the more, also in education as well. The higher educated states and voters tended to be more involved than the lower educated states. And these are broad sweeping generalizations, but it just goes to show that, understand the wealth class knows that voting is important, even if they're trying to tell us, the rest of us, that it doesn't. And this is another one of those things for me that when you look at the inequality in this country, voting participation, I think, is part of that. And I'm hoping there's a swing around the idea that people need to get out and participate. Interestingly enough, Wallet Hub points out that blue states are more politically engaged than red states. They ranked, they go through their series of rankings, and it's an interesting calculation that they've come up with. Now, I find Wallet Hub to be, slightly right-leaning. So this actually kind of surprised me, that 31 ranking to 21 ranking of blue states having more political engagement than the red states. Average of young people involved by age group, they looked at the 18 to 24 group of who actually voted in the 2012 presidential election, and the number one state for young people voting was Mississippi. Minnesota, followed by Minnesota and Colorado. Pennsylvania ranked, I think somewhere in the 20, I think they were 20th. We had 42% of people aged 18 to 24 who turned out. So you had less than half, a lot less, 4 in 10 of people 18 to 24 in the Commonwealth who bothered to go and vote. And then you wonder, and you go, well, gee, why are student loans $1 trillion? Why do we have policies that are taking money from education and from higher education? I would argue in part that only 4 in 10 bothered to vote. The worst state in the country that they had information for, obviously, was West Virginia, with only 22% of people 18 to 24 who bothered to get out and vote. I got to be honest, just stunning to me. But it's another one of these interesting little tidbits of information, and you take it for what it's worth. They've thrown some numbers together, but overall, the theme that I walk away with is the higher your incomes, the higher education level is, the more interest in being politically active, being politically motivated. And the lower the academic and economic, the lower the participation. And I'm not sure why that is, because the right wing loves to point their finger and go, see these poor people, they know they can vote themselves, welfare and food stamps and heating assistance and housing assistance. They know they can do all that, but they're not. And then I asked the other question: are they not because they don't want to, or are they not because we've put so many barriers in the way? And that's another one of those interesting questions, because you look at the policy pieces that I really truly believe could help close the gap of inequality. The big one for me is allowing people to join and form unions, make it much easier for people to sign up, like it used to be back, in the 30s and 40s. There's that. There are making college not just affordable, but free for everyone who can get in and do the work. Job training, all down the list, there are these policies that we're not pursuing. Making government the employer of last resort, so nobody goes without having a job. There's a lot of this stuff that I think, and I hope we wake up around. Anyway, going to take a quick break, but lots of stuff to get to today. I look forward to some interaction and some thoughts. Quick break. We're going to come right back.
When I'm under attack, I might be down for a moment, but I always go back. It's time for war. It's time for war. It's time for war. It's time for war. It's time for war.
Values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 for Monday, October 27th, 2014. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. As we begin the week, let's look back on 3 major elections held on Sunday. In Ukraine, parliamentarians loyal to President Petro Poroshenko scored major victories, signaling, in the president's words, a desire to deepen ties with Europe. Yesterday, I asked you to vote for Democratic, Reformist, pro-Ukrainian, and pro-European majority. Thank you for hearing and supporting this call. More than 3/4 of voters, a constitutional majority, powerfully and irreversibly supported the course towards Europe. Tunisia also conducted peaceful parliamentary elections on Sunday, handing the country's secular Nida Tounes party the most seats in the newly created National Assembly. The Islamist Ennahda party, which soared in popularity following the Arab Spring, placed second. Voters will go to the polls on November 23rd to elect a new president. And in Brazil, incumbent President Dilma Rousseff earned herself 4 more years in office. It was thought the election could see an upset, with the centrist candidate Aécio Neves portraying himself as better equipped to manage the social welfare programs bolstered during Rousseff's first term. Rousseff is credited with expanding the welfare rolls in the country, but she's faced criticism for declining education and health standards. In her victory speech, Rousseff pledged to undertake urgent action to, quote, resume our rhythm of growth, and she also committed to kickstarting industrial production and increasing salaries. After 12 years in office, Rousseff's Workers' Party will need to deliver on those promises in order to hold back mounting opposition in the years ahead. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. Fox News host Kimberly Guilfoyle came under fire this week for arguing that young women are too ignorant to vote or serve on jury duty.
It seems to be even more sexist to assume that women cannot take care of themselves because they're women and therefore need the government to take care of them.
Right. That's the thing. But when you're young like that, you think the same reason why young women on juries are not a good idea. They don't get it.
After widespread backlash, Guilfoyle falsely insisted her comments were taken out of context.
I take the right to vote very seriously. I take the right to serve on a jury very seriously. And I think you should be informed when you do both things.
This should come as a little surprise. As Media Matters has previously detailed, the network has a history of pushing propaganda to help suppress voting. Just recently, Fox host Harris Faulkner questioned whether young people should vote if they don't know the issues. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call on our brothers and our sisters. And all you and I are in. You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets aligned, ain't no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on, yeah, we can do it. We need to revive, re-amp, and re-up the labor movement.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I talked about this last week when Bill Gates is trying to defend inequality, and you see the voices out there saying, well, inequality in the country is not as bad as you think it is. And I argue that you look around, pretty bad, especially when we did our labor history tour across the South and the Southwest. there are a lot of opportunities for us to make things a little bit better. And as I talked about last week, Dean Baker, the co-director and co-founder of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, wrote a great piece on the richest man in the world trying to defend inequality, which is why we've asked him on the program. Dean, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
So does it seem odd that the richest guy, one of the richest guys in the world, is attempting to defend this mass inequality to you?
Well, it's bold of him, I guess I'd say, and I figured, okay, this was kind of delicious. I actually thought it was the richest, but I'm not that sure of the rankings. But in any case, one of the richest, certainly, people in the world saying that inequality is actually a good thing, and essentially he's arguing the case that the people like himself who are super rich got super rich by providing great services to society. So he looks, and I believe he's right. I've not checked independently, but he looks at the Forbes 400, their list of the richest people in the country. He said most of these people didn't inherit it. They made their wealth, and again, I believe that to be true. In most cases, it's a little misleading because they're mostly people like Bill Gates who grew up in a wealthy family. Obviously, not super wealthy. They weren't billionaires, but his dad was an extremely successful corporate lawyer. So I'm sure he was well into the 1%, but obviously not a multi-billionaire. But in any case, the point that I made in response is that when you look at it, they often made huge amounts of wealth, and Bill Gates is certainly in this category, by doing things that, if they weren't technically illegal, they certainly weren't contributing to society. And in Bill Gates' case, he basically got a monopoly on Microsoft because he did competitive practices that would have been antitrust violations 30 years ago. But, we've changed enforcement of antitrust law, and he was able to get away with them.
Yeah, in fact, in the article, you write the old saying goes, behind every great fortune lies a great crime.
Yeah, and, again, that may be an exaggeration. There are people, I could point to Steve Jobs, and certainly no saint. One could take, lots of issues with Apple's tax practices, their labor practices. We actually know they were colluding to prevent their workers from getting higher pay with Google and their other competitors. But the one thing you could say, okay, Apple products are good products. I'm not saying I'm a lover of Apple. I'm just saying people like them.
Right.
Harder to say that about Bill Gates' software. I don't know anyone, either from the software end, I'm not a programmer, but I do know people who are, or from the consumer end, someone who's a user of it. I don't know anyone who thinks it's a good product, but, because he was, he's obviously, sharp guy, ambitious competitor, he was able to squeeze out the competition, again, by using tactics that almost certainly would have been illegal back in the 70s, but with the Justice Department essentially asleep, he was able to get away with that.
Yeah, but doesn't the entire argument go back to the right-wing argument that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and even if you didn't have bootstraps, you whittle them out of sheer intestinal fortitude. Doesn't that play into that same frame?
Absolutely, and that's why I think it's really important for people who want to take issue. I mean, he says, "Oh, I'm going to donate most of my money; it won't go to my kids." That's good, okay. And he actually comes out for an estate tax, which glad to see. But to my mind, the bigger thing is, how is it that these people made great fortunes? And again, I'm willing to allow some of them made great contributions to society. But when you go down that list, most of the ones I'm familiar with their fortunes, you have a lot of people, for example, Wall Street types, they got very rich because they could trade, they've developed a way to trade, a microsecond ahead of, someone else and make a fortune because they pick up the profit rather than the long-term investor. That's not a great contribution to society.
Yeah, and when you look at the reality of the numbers being what they are, we are at one of the more unequal times in our history, going back to before the Great Depression. We are really two societies, no?
Absolutely, and the 1% have really pulled away from everyone else. And we can look back over the last 3 decades, 35 years really now, and most people have had almost none of the gains from growth. And I was just on a show with someone this morning, and he was saying, well, if because of inequality we had more growth, then perhaps it's justified. And I go, all right, I'm open to that, but growth has actually not been that great. So we could look back. We had the period after World War II. We had very strong growth, and it was evenly shared. So workers, in the middle, at the bottom, they saw as large or larger percentage gains as those at the very top, and that was very rapid growth.
Right.
Since then, we look at the years since 1980, growth for the most part has been relatively weak, and almost all of it has benefited those at the top.
So when I argue,
kind of hard to see the good part of that story.
Yeah, so when I argue that it's the destruction of labor unions and putting roadblocks between workers being able to organize, and also a tax code that is really at historic levels, fairly low tax rates, especially for the Bill Gateses of the world. It's my view that we created this situation out of policy. This isn't the free market, the invisible hand doing this. This is something that we've done.
Exactly, and those are items on the list. It gets longer. Our trade policy has been about putting our middle income workers, auto workers, steel workers, in competition with low paid workers in Mexico and China and other countries. We don't do that for our doctors. We could, but our doctors are politically powerful enough that they're not subjected to the same competition. The Federal Reserve Board, we're in this debate now. A lot of people want the Federal Reserve Board to raise interest rates, slow the economy, and keep people from getting jobs. Well, the Federal Reserve Board has run a much more contractionary policy over the last 3 decades, so that the unemployment rate has been much higher since 1980 on average than it was in the decades prior to 1980. And we all know if there's a higher unemployment rate, workers have less bargaining power. So there's a long list of items. These are policy choices. This isn't just something that happened. These were all things done by people in positions with political power.
Yeah, because you talk about the almost $3 trillion Forbes 400, and I've often said we created that. There weren't that many billionaires back in the 80s. We created all this, and I actually have a favorite, as I think since we created them, we should all have a favorite, since it is our doing. The guy who owns the Ravens, who made his money through outsourcing. So I think if you've got to have a favorite, it might as well be Schatz.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. That's I look to Jeff Bezos, actually. The person who started Amazon.
There you go.
Washington Post. His big fortune. He's done lots of things we complain about, certainly his labor practices. But his big fortune is because he's avoided collecting state sales taxes through most of Amazon's existence in most states, and that's a huge subsidy. And it's just amazing he's been able to get away with that
for as long as he's gotten away with it. I know here in Pennsylvania, they passed a law that says if I buy something from Amazon, I'm supposed to pay them the taxes. They just don't have the enforcement arm to go out and get it from people. Now, I don't buy anything from Amazon, but I know people who do.
Yeah, well, Amazon said, "Oh, we can't collect the tax." You go, "Come on, you guys aren't stupid." You know how to collect money from people, and the fact is, a lot of small stores, of course, do have to collect the sales tax. So it's just it's just absurd. You believe in free market capitalism? Well, here you have a corner store, run by a family business. They have to collect sales tax and send to the state. But Amazon's selling, tens of billions of dollars a year, and they're saying, "Oh, no, that doesn't apply to us because we're on the web." Who cares?
Yeah, and for me, their labor practices, much like FedEx's, are deplorable in my view. I mean, they don't even, actually. I don't know that they have an awful lot of employees. They use a lot of third-party logistics companies and the such like that. And now I guess they're going to put they're talking about putting UPS and the post office out of business by using drones to deliver packages. They don't need workers.
Yeah, no, they really have some incredible ideas, and I don't even know if he put that out there. And of course, he got a lot of play. Bezos talking about drones. I don't even know if that's serious, but if it is, it sounds pretty wacky to me. I got to say,
it is completely wacky. But and looking at this inequality, Dean, I look at what's going on with Ebola. I mean, my daughter came home a couple of weeks ago, just mortified. The end of the world was coming because everybody at school was, believed everyone's going to get sick, and 284 million people are going to die, and all of this. And, I look at Ebola as another one of these moments of inequality. I don't see the billionaires rushing around going, "Oh, it's coming for us." I see a lot of working people kind of freaking out.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two aspects to this. I mean, one is that, obviously most of the victims to date have been in sub-Saharan Africa. These tend to be among the poorest people in the world. And, I wonder if the disease had been hitting people that had more money, whether there would have been more focus on developing a vaccine. And that's not pie in the sky. Apparently there was a vaccine that, the early tests were very promising, but no one's willing to cough up the money to carry it through to fruition. But the other point is that, as with everything else, it tends to be the case the wealthy can protect themselves. They're, for the most part, not worried. Now, realistically, I don't think most of us have much reason to be worried, but, you certainly do have a lot of people who are acting like they might get it tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you hear the news reports for a while anyway that the end was coming near. But this is not something new. I mean, this disease has been around since 1976. There just hasn't been the, if not political will, the financial will. And part of me says that the pharmaceutical industry would love it to come to a first world country or to the U.S. so that they could make money scaring people. Because I don't know if you saw, but I get bombarded with emails from people going, we're now selling Ebola suits, so I can buy my own full hazmat garb.
Yeah, well, you'll see a lot of craziness like that. I remember back the anthrax scares back in 2001. You had all sorts of people, doing all sorts of crazy things because they were worried they were going to get hit by an anthrax attack. And obviously people are making money selling that stuff, and it's just really sad because it's a lot of people don't have money to be throwing away on basically pointless things. I mean, I understand people could be scared, but the reality was people don't have to worry about anthrax then, and they don't have to worry about Ebola today. I mean, if you're a healthcare worker working with people with Ebola, yes, that's reasonable concern, but for the rest of us, we really don't have to worry about it.
That's what I tell my daughter. You'll be fine. You got a better chance of getting hit by a bus. And we don't live on the bus route. But here's the thing. Going back to inequality, how do we close this gap that we're now seeing? I just saw a report the other day that said that this Gini coefficient, we're considerably higher than most of the other developed nations, and in fact, in some areas we're right with some of the developing nations. Policy-wise, politically, what should we be pushing for in this upcoming election?
Well, there's a lot of things certainly on the agenda. I mean, I think the Affordable Care Act is a big step forward, making it better, though. I mean, there's a lot of people that have complaints, legitimate complaints. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing to do. It just, the Times had an article yesterday in New York Times about how a lot of people are being faced with all these extra charges. So they think they get a bill from the doctor and they think that they see the bill, and then a week later they get a secondary bill saying, oh, well, your insurance didn't cover X, Y, and Z. So that's the sort of thing shouldn't happen. Diagnostic tests that I remember seeing, there are people that have had cancer that need scanning, and the scanning's not covered. I mean, that's just like, how can you not cover? I mean, that should be a requirement. Again, insurance in general, we'd like to see them pay more, but this one's just really straightforward. If you need an expensive scan because you've had cancer or some other disease, that part should be covered. So there are things like that. Another thing that's really front and center, or should be front and center, doesn't get enough attention, is Federal Reserve Board policy. The Federal Reserve Board can slow the economy and keep people from getting jobs. That's what this debate over interest rates, you hear people saying, oh, the Fed should raise interest rates. That's what that is about. And a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, the Fed can't always make the economy grow, but it can certainly keep the economy from growing.
Right. They can slam on the brakes if they want.
Exactly. And, a lot of people want them to do it. I've been very happy. Janet Yellen, I think, is outstanding as Fed chair, and she's indicated she doesn't want to do that. But she's just one vote on the Open Market Committee. There's 12 votes there, and she's just one. She's the most important one, but she is just one. And if there gets to be enough support the other way, she'll have to go along, or she'll be overridden, whichever. I mean, they will slam on the brakes. But that's hugely important. I mean, because, again, if they don't want people to get jobs, they won't get jobs.
Because here again, I keep seeing these unemployment rates being 6%, and I'm going, well, that's not full employment in my view. I would like to see it 5 and below.
We had 4% as year-round average in 2000. So can we get back there again? I don't know. I'd like to see us try. I mean, that would be a great thing. Let's try and see if we can't get to 4%. Yeah. And of course, one of the reasons it's even as low as it is because so many people have dropped out of the labor force. It's not that they found jobs; they gave up looking.
And that's the other part of all this. I still say we're in the middle of a jobs crisis. It just hasn't been one of the things we've focused on.
Yeah, no, that's right. We still have a long way to go to get back to 2007, which, of course, as we all know, wasn't great, but we're still way worse off than we were in 2007.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dean, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for the work you guys do, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
And we ain't even planning on losing in this mighty war. The working class is under attack. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Can you answer that question that you didn't answer on stage? Do you think man contributes to climate change or not?
Republican candidates still dodging the climate change question.
There is a personal cost paid by those families who live near coal mining sites.
Mountaintop removal coal mining promotes lung cancer. Another day, another oil spill, this time in Louisiana. 2014 is on track to be the hottest year on record. Plus, everything is awesome. Lego breaks up with Shell Oil.
All of those breakups and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Do you believe climate change in part is caused by activities of man? Yes.
Wow, finally, a direct answer from a Tea Party candidate for governor of Connecticut.
But not the activities necessarily that some scientists believe they are.
No, brother. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, all campaign season long, we have been tracking these Republican candidates as they have been asked about climate change really for the first time in any election cycle. And the dodges and dancing has really been extraordinary to watch.
I know. It's kind of funny. Republican candidates have been trying to evade the question of whether they accept the scientific consensus on man-made global warming. Most recently, in the Connecticut governor's race, here's the Republican nominee, front-runner Tom Foley.
Mr. Foley, what do you think the cause of climate change is?
Well, what I've said is it doesn't really matter. It's happening. So if a leader and people in positions of public responsibility need to address a threat. So I don't think there's any debate about whether or not it's happening, so we have to find solutions.
So it's happening, perhaps by magic, but we need to do something about it. Okay, that's progress.
Connecticut's governor, Democrat Daniel Malloy, was unequivocal.
Of course it matters. And yes, we've had Irene and Sandy and storms in months that we've never had snow in before and amounts of snow that we've never seen before. Of course climate change is real. Of course it's beaten us up. Of course it's cost us money. And to deny that is to deny reality.
He says deny reality like that's a bad thing or something.
Well, not to Joe Visconti, the Tea Party Republican running as an independent in the Connecticut governor's race. He's got news for scientists.
I believe we are in climate change, but it may not be global warming. There's a book called Chill. You all should look at it. Chill is the name of the book, and it talks about the fluctuations of the climate and actually moving more into a mini ice age.
Unbelievable, the dancing and dodging. How about just going with science?
Meanwhile, the real scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are also unequivocal. The planet is now on pace for 2014 to be the hottest year on record. The last 12-month period was the hottest 12-month stretch on record. And NOAA also says ocean warming is accelerating. Although some of these non-scientists claim we've had no global warming in 18 years, a NOAA scientist tells AP, quote, "No one bothered to tell the globe that." Now, the question is, if 2014 does end up being the hottest year on record, will the deniers stop saying we're in global cooling?
Of course not. Why would they? They've got fossil fuel industry money they need to make. These elections aren't just going to run themselves, Des.
Cleanup has begun after an oil pipeline rupture in a northern Louisiana bayou over the weekend dumped an estimated 170,000 gallons of crude oil into a residential area. Residents were evacuated, but 140 wild animals didn't get that warning and have been confirmed dead. Mountaintop removal coal mining again linked to lung cancer.
The federal government has to conduct a study on the health impact of mountaintop removal before it issues any more permits.
That was Representative John Yarmouth, Democrat of West Virginia, in a congressional hearing last July calling for a moratorium on federal permits for mountaintop removal coal mining. And not a moment too soon, a new West Virginia University study has found that the dust from mountaintop removal coal mining actually promotes the growth of lung cancer tumors. The study confirms previous research showing families living near coal operations have increased risk of cancer, birth defects, and early death. Dr. Matthew Wasson of Appalachian Voices tells Congress it's ample evidence for a federal moratorium on mountaintop removal.
There's too much information showing health problems to continue to ignore.
You know, when you've got a congressman from West Virginia, of all places, Democrat or not, calling for a moratorium on mountaintop removal coal mining. It seems like people ought to be standing up and paying attention.
Finally, some good news in a blow to Shell Oil's PR strategy to get its logo on children's toys. Lego has now announced it will not renew its contract with Shell Oil after a creepy viral video by Greenpeace depicting Lego toys drowning in oil.
Everything is awesome.
So no more of those little Shell Oil logos on my Lego set?
That's right.
That's just so sad. For much more on that story and all of the other ones we covered and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website where everything is awesome at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. Blog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Everything is awesome. Cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome. When you live a dream.
Thank you. The National Labor Relations Act was a New Deal initiative which helped save American capitalism by creating a process which would protect the rights of employees and employers. This was before NAFTA, GATT, and the WTO, which tore legal rights for workers apart, moved millions of jobs out of the U.S. Yes, we stand for the workers at Boeing in Washington State, but we also stand for the workers at Boeing in South Carolina, because they will have no recourse if Boeing wants to move jobs to China. You can't say you want to create jobs here at home while destroying the rights of workers to organize, the right to collective bargaining. These are basic rights in a democratic society. You can't say you want to protect American jobs and not protect American workers. Take away workers' rights to free speech, take away workers' right to due process, and you create a new class of slave laborers here in the United States who are helpless to stop the movement of jobs out of America.
The time has come to come and play. This is a battle cry for the common people. We've got to know we're kids stuck in the middle. We're singing this song for
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. You may remember a while ago, I had talked about this woman who over the summer was found dead in her car behind a convenience store in New Jersey. And I remember talking, her name was Maria Fernandez, 32-year-old single mother, worked 3 minimum wage Dunkin' Donuts jobs. And I remember at the time going, this is a failure of policy to help working class people. This is a failure of our labor laws. This is a failure of the low-waged economy. And, I honestly was spot on, and I still believe that to be the case. But the New York Daily News did a really interesting report on this woman that tells a much fuller story about her life and who she was. And I remember at the time reading, because her name was Fernandez, and you saw all of the right-wing reactionaries going, she was here illegally, that was why it was. And she wasn't here illegal. She was a citizen of the U.S. But that shouldn't matter. That shouldn't matter at all. This is someone who was working 3 jobs. This is someone the right wing should have opened their arms to and go, this is what we want for America. It's kind of like, George Bush, with the woman who said, I work 3 jobs, and he said, well, that's uniquely American. And I remember at the time, just being kind of freaked out by this, going, really? Is this what we want? Well, here's George himself.
There's a certain comfort to know that the promises made will be kept by the government. You don't have to worry.
That's good, because I work 3 jobs and I feel like I contribute.
You work 3 jobs.
3 jobs, yes.
Uniquely American.
Uniquely American.
And that is fantastic if you're doing that.
That's fantastic you're doing that. Not like you had much of a choice, but just fantastic you're doing that. And the same thing for this woman. Working 87 hours a week. 87 hours a week. And, you know, she could have been a truck driver. But I look at this and I go back to our broken labor law. She worked for 3 different Dunkin' Donuts. The reason I think that, and I said this back then, why they should have, if she's working 87 hours a week, to me, that's 47 hours overtime. 47 hours of overtime would have, I think, helped her. She probably could have quit one of the extra jobs and maybe just worked 60 hours a week. But what we've done in this country is we've propped up this low-waged economy. And we've given these franchisees the political cover of saying, we're small businesses. We're independent small businesses. No, you're part of a massive chain where the profits, a good portion of the profits go up to the corporate headquarters and you get to keep a little bit of it. All in the guise of, I'm going to be my own boss. And it's set up on how much can we cheat our workers. Now, 87 hours a week, as the newspaper pointed out, is about 36 grand a year. And I look at this and I start thinking about the numbers. You go back to McDonald's website where they said, about $13.80, $14 an hour to them was the minimum you needed to exist. The minimum that you needed to survive in their little budget world. And you just sit down and do the math, that's somewhere right around $36,000 to $40,000 a year to get it to exist. Especially where she lived, where her apartment was $1,100 a month. And you look at the sad nature of this, and the story just tells I really think one of those amazing stories of people who are in this situation, who are extremely generous and selfless and always willing to help others. And, just all of this warmth and generosity that they go into. And they said a little bit, back then, but, even though she didn't have an awful lot, she was always willing to share and all of these things. I struggle because I don't think anyone should have to, just to exist, work 3 jobs. I just don't. And on a certain level, this is a societal failure. And, while we're talking about inequality in the last segment, this is one of those moments. And all of the things that we've done policy-wise to create a billionaire class, which we have. And I got to be honest, I liked Dean Baker's favorite billionaire. Again, made his money through gaming the system, and in a big way. I mean, if you wanted to open up a store and choose not to collect sales tax, you'd be going to jail. Somehow he's figured out how to do it internationally. And that comes through being politically connected. So I may rethink that whole favorite billionaire thing. I mean, as much as I don't like the Baltimore Ravens, their owner made their money outsourcing. And they were very honest about it. That's how I found out about it. The Forbes 400 announced it as, he made his money outsourcing. And I go, wow, honesty. I like that. But we should maybe find out what it meant to the millions of people who lost their jobs because of it. The millions of people whose lifestyles and their lives were upended and struggled for who knows how long, if the struggle ever stopped. And I come back to this woman who, while the article says, died tragically, but she was no martyr, I don't think it's about being a martyr. I think it's another one of these tragic stories of working class people who are on this treadmill that they cannot get off. And it only gets worse as the bills continue to pile. They tell the story, she bought a $1,000 Kia. She bought a car that was, 13 years old and was in need of repair almost all the time. And this is the poor working class story. You never have the ability to buy a car that runs for longer than 6 months or a year without breaking down and costing more. You never have the ability to do some of the preventative stuff that you may need to do. And, as I look at this, the more I view this story, the more this is just another one of those sad, tragic tales of people who struggle and struggle and struggle, and there's never an end of it. Now, unfortunately, her life ended because she had gas in the car. Because sometimes she'd run out of gas. She didn't have enough money to constantly fill the tank up, or the time, because they went through this woman's schedule, which was just shocking to me. She would work from 2 to 9 p.m. Inside the Newark main train station. So that 7-hour block, she would work for one Dunkin' Donuts. From 9 to 10 p.m., she had an hour to get from the Newark main train station to Linden, New Jersey, downtown, where there was a 24-hour Dunkin' Donut where she would work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So basically, this woman was working a shift from 2 to 6 a.m., 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. And for those of you who are math challenged, that's a 16-hour day. So she goes home and maybe she gets some sleep during the morning. On Saturdays and Sundays, she worked from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. at another Dunkin' Donuts in Harrison, New Jersey. So you're looking at 7 days a week. For 5 of those days, you're working 16 hours a day, 5 hours on Saturdays and Sundays. And just to stay on the treadmill. I got to be honest, that to me, very dangerous. Not healthy, but really good for the ownership class. And to me, it's a sad, sad story that, unfortunately, this woman isn't an isolated case. Frustrating. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Politicians, they own. Their greed and corruption are very well known. On a consumer code of silence is what they depend. We know it, so let's don't pretend. You and me know it, so let's don't pretend.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
When 5 Supreme Court justices decreed that corporations are entitled to full free speech rights in our elections, and that corporate money is a form of speech that cannot be restricted, they produced a nightmare tsunami of corporate cash that is now drowning our people's democratic rights. After all, if money is speech, then speech is no longer free. It's for sale. This year, we're seeing what the court's absurd edict is costing us. First, the corporate purchase of political speech has in fact reached tsunamic force in the current congressional races. Spending on TV ads will likely top $2 billion, 70% higher than 4 years ago when the court issued its Citizen United money ruling. Second, the bulk of this speech is not being bought by candidates or parties, but by secretive outside front groups that hide the corporate interest funding the ads. In Senate races alone, these shadow groups have already run some 150,000 TV spots. The Koch brothers' main front group, Americans for Prosperity, is by far the biggest buyer of speech, having laid out $44 million on congressional races in just the first 6 months of this election year. Third, and most pernicious, the court-created right of moneyed front groups to flood the airwaves has handed them the power to dictate any campaign's message. The ads of those secret fronts now define the issues and even the candidates themselves before the race really gets going. Worse, because the outside groups are anonymous, their speech consists almost entirely of the nastiest, most vituperative attacks on candidates they oppose, turning our election year discourse into a toxic slime fest that turns off voters and shrivels turnout. This is Jim Hightower saying, to join others and help stop the corporate purchase of the people's political speech rights, connect with movetoamend.org. That's www.movetoamend.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Controls the past now, controls the future, controls the present now, controls the past, controls the past now, controls the future, controls the present now. Now testify.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. I look at another one of these issues that, in my view, can be solved. I saw a story that New York City is one of the highest, has one of the highest homelessness rates in the world. And you look at, they're saying somewhere around 56,000 people last month. 56,000 people, which is a high. They point out that around the world, Japan evidently has the lowest rate of homelessness in their country, with about 1,600 people in what is currently the largest city in the world. And you go, well, how's that possible? When you look at a city like Tokyo, that has, over 13.5 million people, compared to the almost 8.5 million people that are in New York, where you have in New York 67 people for every 10,000 who are homeless, whereas in Tokyo it's one. How does that happen? And I would argue there's a couple of things. One is the push towards less inequality. If you look at the Gini coefficient that we talked about earlier, that is, they use this to, I guess, 0 would be your perfectly socialist, equal. Everyone's equal. Everybody in the entire country makes the exact same amount, lives the exact same lifestyle, and 1 being completely unequal, where there are some people who have everything, and then the rest of the people have nothing. So you have the extreme opposites, 0 and 1. The U.S. is about 0.41, whereas Japan is about 0.32, which is closer to more equal than not. The U.S. has, of the industrialized nations, the highest, as I understand, the highest Gini coefficient. That I find interesting. And what they've done is they've pushed for real social safety net programs, whereas we've kind of gone the other way. The Japanese Constitution guarantees its citizens the right to maintain a minimum standard of wholesome and cultured living. We don't have anything like that. You have the right to the pursuit of happiness, right? So I guess that's open to interpretation. You pursue your own happiness. And I was talking about this over the weekend with somebody that, we had better start talking about guaranteed minimum incomes to allow people to participate in the economy. And look, this is not a radical left-wing idea. This was a Milton Friedman idea, a right-wing pro-corporate idea of making sure that people have money to be able to take part in the economy so that the very wealthy could get money from them. And it seems to me we've got to have a real push, especially by the lower end working folks. People, like me, people like most of the folks I know who, in 20 years when those jobs are gone, because if you don't know, be aware, half of the jobs we do today in 20 years, they predict will be gone. Then what do people do? If we've mechanized and we've automated and we've computerized and we've robotic everything to the point to where humans aren't necessary, how do humans survive? How do human people survive? If corporate people can afford whatever they want, what about human people? Corporate people can live without food. Human people cannot. So it's an interesting situation, and it's an interesting little tidbit that I thought worthy of putting forth, because I don't think we're doing enough, especially when you talk about homeless vets and folks with mental health issues. I don't think we do nearly enough. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. Oh, that's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Make sure you get that on the smartphone. If you've got Google Play or iTunes, just look for the Rick Smith Show. As always, you can email me, Rick at the Rick Smith Show. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. At a Geneva, Switzerland Public Sector Unions Conference, the Trade in Services Agreement, or TISA, got a lot of attention. You may never have heard of TISA. It's not surprising considering the secrecy in which the agreement affecting 70% of the world's trade in services is being negotiated. AFL-CIO Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist Celeste Drake told Canada's Radio Labour that TISA could have a huge impact on workers and the power of governments to legislate public services policy.
TISA and agreements like it do pose a real threat to workers and their families. The main problem is they are really made on the basis of corporate needs and desires, and it's what the corporations want. And when these agreements are made behind closed doors, where workers, consumers, environmental advocates, food advocates, public health advocates can't see the text, then we can't really have a strong impact on what the outcomes are. And then the corporate agenda gets advanced. And what happens is slowly, sort of agreement by agreement by agreement, the policy space for governments is diminished.
First student school bus drivers in Oakland, California are looking forward to their first work under a labor contract as Teamsters. The drivers voted to join Teamsters Local 853. 150 drivers transport students in the Oakland Unified School District. The drivers and monitors at First Student in Oakland will be covered by the Teamsters National Master Agreement with First Student.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. In a few hours, they're going to play Game 3 of the 2014 World Series, which maybe you've heard is for the championship of professional baseball. Or maybe you haven't heard that, because from looking at the all-important TV ratings, practically no one is watching the Fall Classic. In fact, the first two games between the San Francisco Giants and the Kansas City Royals had some of the worst ratings in World Series history. But it's not really surprising. Once called our national pastime, baseball has morphed into strictly a regional sport. Without a major market team in this series, it largely goes unnoticed. As it is now, even with the Cinderella Royals playing in their first series since 1985, against a Giants team that is trying to nail down their third title in the last 5 seasons. But unless you followed baseball this season, you probably have no idea that the two teams only qualified for the postseason as wildcard teams by first winning a one-game play-in playoff game. The Royals beat the A's to start what became a record 8-game winning streak, and the Giants defeated Pittsburgh before going on to post-series wins against the Nationals and Cardinals. But here they are, each trying to win the World Series, if anyone cares to watch. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Taking care of business every day. Taking care of business every way. I've been taking care of business. It's all right. Taking care of business and working overtime.
Well, I got to tell you, it would be nice come November 4th to be able to say, Mike Turzai, done. That'd be nice, I think. I'm hoping Governor Corbett done as well. He's got that vacation home down in South Carolina. I'm sure he's just itching to get to, even if he didn't bother to report it. You know, the smartest guy, supposedly, the legal mind of Pennsylvania, former Attorney General, didn't understand that you have to report that kind of stuff when you buy a new home as governor down in South Carolina. Just a thought, because maybe somebody might ask, hey, Tom, where'd you get the money? Just a thought. But here again, I hope on the calendar, marked, circled in big red ink, highlighted, whatever you got to do, tie a ribbon around your finger. I don't know. November 4th, you got to get out and vote. And especially young women, just to tick off Fox News. Evidently, the Fox News, the 5 co-host, Kimberly Guilfoyle, Or I think that's how you pronounce her name. I've never actually watched the show. But the quote that I got from her just blows my mind. Evidently, young women shouldn't be on juries or vote because according to her, they don't get it. They're not in the same life experience of paying bills, doing the mortgage, kids, community, crime, education, healthcare. No, none of that. They're likely healthy and hot and running around without a care in the world. She went on to say, I just thank and excuse them so they can go back on Tinder or Match.com. This is what just blows my mind, how it is they've been able to divide women this age. Wow, just mind-blowing. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about what's going on come November 4th and the suppression tricks we're finding around the country. I've asked Meagan Hatcher-Mays. She's a researcher for Court Matters. Meagan, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So I look at this woman on fake news on Fox saying that, these young women shouldn't bother to vote because, well, they don't know anything. They're just women.
Yeah, I mean, so that was a part of a larger conversation about being whether or not certain demographics are informed voters or not. And she went on this very odd tangent about how she would excuse young women from juries because they were too kind of caught up in being on Tinder or Match.com. This is disturbing on a couple of different levels, not the least of which that Kimberly Guilfoyle used to be an assistant district attorney when she lived in California. And so not only was she an attorney and should know better, she was also a trial attorney and would, pick juries for criminal cases. So it's kind of disturbing that she would say, I don't think young women should be on juries because they're too carefree. That's a little questionable in my view.
I agree.
But this isn't, kind of the first time that Fox has had sort of a problematic discussion about who should and should not vote. I mean, in the past month, they've had Tucker Carlson say, "Oh, are we sure that we want people who watch, that TLC show, Say Yes to the Dress about picking out a wedding dress? Are we sure we want people like that to vote?" Essentially saying that young women, all young women care about is reality TV and they're low information voters and therefore they shouldn't vote.
Oh, hold on a second. Hold on. Shouldn't we then ask that same question of Fox viewers? Since obviously, I mean, the polling has been done that says that the average Fox viewer is less informed than people who don't pay attention to any news.
Right. And this isn't, there's a number of different segments where they've gone into this thing where it's like, well, I'm not sure that young women have enough information to vote. And this Guilfoyle thing was not so much about voting more, so about whether or not they should serve on juries, but it's part of this sort of larger, broader question about whether Fox News thinks young women should participate in their civic duties. And the answer is yes, you should. We all should. But they've got like a kind of a whole list of people they don't want voting, and oddly enough, it's a demographic that usually votes Democratic.
Yeah. No, and look, I understand that. You go back, you understand that you want to get your side of the vote out, and we play the clip on the program quite often of Paul Weyrich, back in 1980, talking to 20,000 Baptist ministers, saying, look, when our people get out to vote, we win. If we can hold down the other side, much better. I forget how the quote exactly goes. Do we want everyone to vote? I don't want everyone to vote. Our leverage goes up when the voting populace goes down. That was his exact quote. They've been following that mentality since, I think, the beginning of voting.
Right. Elizabeth Hasselbeck on Fox and Friends basically suggested that people should have to take citizenship tests. All of these sorts of crazy Jim Crow and pre-Jim Crow laws that they kind of want to go back to, and they just kind of play it off like it's no big deal. It's like, yeah, this makes sense. Everyone should have to take a test before they can vote.
Until they
really
fail.
Big proponents of, right. Yes, exactly. So they're big proponents of voter ID laws. They have a lot of talking heads come on to talk about how great voter ID is and how great it is for the system, when these laws have really shown to have an impact on voter turnout, particularly among people of color and young people and young voters. This isn't just a hypothetical exercise. I mean, these voter ID laws are seriously bad, and they.
Yep.
And you will probably not be surprised to learn that Fox News appears to be in support of them.
Well, no, I mean, the reality is you look at the chairman of the Pennsylvania Republican Party, who after the 2012 election said that he believed just the threat of the voter ID laws here in Pennsylvania swung the vote by 5% from Obama to Romney. Now, Obama still won the state, but not by the margin he had before. And the Republican chairman here in Pennsylvania believed that had everything to do with the threat of that ID and people going, I don't have one, so I can't vote. He actually believed that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a recent GAO report, the Government Accountability Office report, that did find a correlation between in Kansas and Tennessee, where that had recently passed restrictive voter ID laws, and a reduction in voter turnout among people of color. So this is real. There is a real correlation between these laws and whether or not certain groups of people turn out to vote.
Yeah, but isn't that the point?
Expensive.
Wasn't that the point?
It is.
I mean, you go back to all of the voter suppression tactics that we've seen since 2000. I mean, you look at the voter rolls in Florida, especially, where they threw people off the voting roll, some 90,000 people, because their names may have looked like someone who might have been convicted of a felony. In fact, one guy they had thrown off the rolls because they claimed in 6 or 7 years he was going to commit a felony. So they were just being preemptive. And then in 2004, you saw the caging that went on, where they sent out, you got to re-sign up for your registration. And if you don't get it, it had to be sent directly back. And they held those registrations in a cage, which is where the caging came from. And all of these things are for what? To hold the vote down, especially poor people, minorities, seniors, and college students who, as you've pointed out, tend to vote for Democrats.
Right, and so I think you see, I mean, in Texas is a really good example of this. They basically made it impossible to vote using a state student ID that used to be permitted. In Missouri, the same is true. When I lived in Missouri, you could use your student ID if you went to a state university there as your ID to vote, and they changed that rule. So it's more difficult for students to vote now unless they go get a state-issued driver's license or a state-issued ID. And the reason for that seems pretty clear to me, that they're trying to reduce the number of young people voting in that state. They want them to vote in their home state, wherever that may be, but they don't want them voting in quote-unquote red states like Texas, Missouri, and Kansas, and places like that.
Yeah, and we don't want young people
Texas,
voting.
You can. No,
we don't want
would want
them
to encourage young people to be involved in the democratic process? It sounds horrible in every way.
You don't want to give people who you're screwing any power whatsoever. I mean, you look at the student loan industry, $1 trillion industry that when I was, I'm 47, when I was in my early 20s, didn't really exist. I mean, I got out of college, you had a couple of $1,000s worth of loans, maybe 10 or 12. Now kids are getting out of college $30, $35, $40,000 in debt, and that's at a state school.
Right.
You don't want to give those people power to have anything at the ballot box, because they may use it.
Right, and meanwhile in Texas, you can use your gun license as an acceptable form of ID, but you can't use your student ID as an acceptable form of ID. But,
right.
I think the idea, going back to your point about whether or not this is sort of racially motivated, or motivated in a sense to sort of depress the Democratic vote in particular, I think, last summer, the Supreme Court struck down a really important piece of the Voting Rights Act, and which required states that had a history of, racially discriminatory voting practices to get pre-clearance from the federal government before they made significant changes to their election procedures. It sounds a little boring, but it was important. Basically, the day after the Supreme Court struck that down, North Carolina started pushing its new restrictive voter ID law, because they no longer needed the federal government to give it the stamp of approval before they passed it. So I think if you just look at the facts here, you're seeing states that had previously been required to talk to the federal government before making these changes, all of a sudden making these changes now that they don't need the approval. That happened in North Carolina the day after this decision comes down. It happened in Texas, and you're seeing thousands of people affected by this. Wisconsin's the same. Hundreds of thousands of people potentially don't have the right kind of ID to vote, and they're changing these rules a month before the election is supposed to take place. It's really confusing. It's going to be nearly impossible for a lot of people to get to the DMV to get the right kind of ID. They're not open after normal work hours, so obviously, it on its face affects people working class people who work 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, people who can only find time to go get the right kind of ID on weekends. The place isn't open.
Yep.
So obviously it's affecting people of color, young people, people who have to work. Those are all typically Democrat voters, democratically people
Sure.
who vote Democrat.
And I think of my grandmother as well. I mean, she hasn't driven in about 15 years. She has no form of ID whatsoever. She has a driver's license that expired 15 years ago, but that's it. And most places, when she goes to cash a check or do whatever, that's okay. But the fundamental basis of our democracy, the building block of this the foundation of this experiment of self-rule, no, that's not good enough for that. And what bothers me, Megan, is, here in Pennsylvania, when they had the trial to throw out the voter ID law and rule it unconstitutional, the state and the plaintiff, they both agreed in a stipulation of fact, and you as a court reporter know that at the beginning of every trial you agree on certain facts that you're not going to argue. And what they both agreed on is there has never been, there is not now, and there has not in the future that they can foresee any case, any scenario where this voter ID law would have stopped voter fraud.
Right. I mean, I think that's been the tone of a lot of the recent court decisions that are kind of striking down these voter ID laws. The one in Texas pointed this out, that there were maybe 2 instances of in-person voter fraud in Texas. Wisconsin, I think, only had the one potential for voter fraud, and it wasn't the type that voter ID would have prevented. And it was also a Scott Walker supporter, reportedly. So it's reportedly, allegedly. So it's the kind of fraud that voter ID is supposed to prevent is in-person voter fraud. Like, I go to the polls and I say, "Hey, I'm Bill O'Reilly and I'm here to vote." That nobody does that. That happens.
I can't imagine anyone wanting to be Bill O'Reilly, but okay.
Right.
It's interesting you chose that.
Right, but it's virtually non-existent. It basically never happens. So, but the underlying rationale of these laws is, yes, but we need to pass these voter ID laws to maintain the integrity of our elections, to prevent voter fraud. But the fact is that this type of law doesn't, the type of voter fraud that people want to prevent by passing these laws doesn't really exist. So you have to go back to and ask yourself, why then are you passing these laws? And I think when you see who's getting disenfranchised as a result of them, the answer becomes pretty clear.
No, I mean, I don't know how else you can put it other than they're trying to, as Paul Weyrich said, hold down the vote because their leverage goes up as the rest of us drop out of the system. And I think part of the goal is to make people so uncomfortable and to cause so much, put so many roadblocks in the way that people just, forget it. I'm not going to bother because it's one thing to go down and get a state issued license or photo ID from the DMV, but you still have to go get the documents that come along to get that thing, because there's a list of those as well that you have to pay for. So there's a whole bunch of roadblocks. It's not as simple as I think a lot of folks make it out to be.
It's true.
So,
I mean, the birth certificate's expensive. The ID itself is expensive, but anything above free is, potentially a poll tax. That's what the judge in Texas said. And
there you go.
I think some of the justices on the Supreme Court might agree with that.
And all I got to say is we went to Iraq so that woman could dip her finger in ink and hold her finger up so that they could put that picture in the Bush presidential library. But here we got to have a whole bunch of hurdles and roadblocks to get by.
Right.
Mind blowing. Megan, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for filling us in and spending a little time with us.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Great. Let's take a quick break. Right back. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Turn out for what? Turn out for what?
I'm Darren, and I'm turning out for education. I'm EJ, and I'm turning out for marriage equality.
My name is Lil Lena, and I'm turning out for reproductive rights.
Turn out for what?
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 for Monday, October 27th, 2014. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. As we begin the week, let's look back on 3 major elections held on Sunday. In Ukraine, parliamentarians loyal to President Petro Poroshenko scored major victories, signaling, in the president's words, a desire to deepen ties with Europe. Yesterday, I asked you to vote for Democratic, reformist, pro-Ukrainian, and pro-European majority. Thank you for hearing and supporting this call. More than 3/4 of voters, a constitutional majority, powerfully and irreversibly supported the course towards Europe. Tunisia also conducted peaceful parliamentary elections on Sunday, handing the country's secular Nida Tounes party the most seats in the newly created National Assembly. The Islamist Ennahda party, which soared in popularity following the Arab Spring, placed second. Voters will go to the polls on November 23rd to elect a new president. And in Brazil, incumbent President Dilma Rousseff earned herself 4 more years in office. It was thought the election could see an upset, with the centrist candidate Aécio Neves portraying himself as better equipped to manage the social welfare programs bolstered during Rousseff's first term. Rousseff is credited with expanding the welfare rolls in the country, but she's faced criticism for declining education and health standards. In her victory speech, Rousseff pledged to undertake urgent action to, quote, resume our rhythm of growth, and she also committed to kickstarting industrial production and increasing salaries. After 12 years in office, Rousseff's Workers' Party will need to deliver on those promises in order to hold back mounting opposition in the years ahead. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
I've talked about several aspects of America's Declaration of Independence before, but this time we'll focus on its powerful significance. In the spring of 1776, an honest analysis would show very little hope of George Washington's militia defeating the British Army. The number of militiamen was small, and most that chose to take up arms were not prepared for battle. Further, the general populace in the colonies had regional suspicions and jealousies which made for a very fragile alliance. But unity in military battles do not alone make a revolution. Some revolutions build up strength through abstract feelings and inspirations that are difficult to explain. What Bob Dylan, for example, wrote, "There was revolution in the air." Members of the Continental Congress were beginning to move past their regional issues, and some felt the responsibility to form a new nation. Join us again for Richard Henry Lee. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Your right to vote. It's one thing you never want to miss out on. This year, the law requires that every Pennsylvania voter show a photo ID at the polls. Getting your free ID is simple and easy. Contact us today.
Smiling faces sometimes pretend to be your friend. Smiling faces show no traces of the evil that lurks within. Smiling faces sometimes they don't tell the truth.
No. Hey, it's gonna stop us from. It's gonna stop voter fraud. No, it's gonna stop people from voting. That's the point. And I love the commercial that they put out, and with the nice, happy, smiling people. Oh, we care. We care. Yes, we care. Funny story though. Right when they passed the voter suppression law here in Pennsylvania, a neighbor, whom shall remain nameless, was all in favor of it. until he showed me his license. And his license did not match his voter registration card. Oops. Gotta hate when that happens, which evidently, is not uncommon. Also that if it's outdated. And I look at my grandmother who hasn't had a driver's license in about 15 years. But she still keeps the license. It's 15 years old, and because when you need to cash checks and stuff, and nobody ever gives her a hard time about it. But she would be precluded to vote in one of these states that have these voter suppression laws, which is interesting because in Texas, where early voting is underway, one of the election judges down there, a guy named William Parsley, evidently told Think Progress he's only seen one potential voter turned away at his polling place because of the voter ID, just one. And it happened to be an elderly man, about 93 years old, a veteran, whose license had expired. So they turned him away. Now, Texas, according to many, has the strictest voter ID law in the country. So the people there are supposed to, one of 7 forms of identification that you can have, a driver's license, a federally issued veteran's ID card, or a gun registration. And you got to love that. We won't take college IDs, but we'll take gun registrations, or just a gun. I gotta wonder if that's possible as well. Just kind of mind blowing in my view. Another story in Georgia caught my attention on the voting front. If you remember, Georgia's been one of those states that's really a lot of organizing has been going on, because it's a state that's transforming, because you've got a lot of business growth going on. Atlanta's growing, and you're starting to see some changes going on in the state of Georgia, and a lot of progressive organizing. According to reports, a number of these groups have gone out. One of the groups, the New Georgia Project, but a number of groups went out and they organized people in all of Georgia's 159 counties. I learned something. I didn't know they had that many counties. That's a lot. But evidently they registered about 90,000 people. About 90,000 people, mind you, that have never voted. Brand new voters, virgin clean, not on any rolls, nothing. So they've got about 90,000 people. Most of them, of course, people of color and under 25. 2 demographics. The right wing does not want voting. What happened is these groups then went back and went and said, hey, we want to check and make sure that people are registered. So when they go to vote, they're already registered. There are no problems. Turns out about 50,000 of the 90,000 registrations have somehow vanished. And oddly enough, all of them belonging to people of color in democratically leaning areas around Atlanta, Savannah, and Columbus, Georgia. Oddly enough, it's amazing how that happens, isn't it? Now, a couple of groups have filed a lawsuit. Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law and the Georgia NAACP and others have filed a lawsuit seeking that the state's attorney general, or the Secretary of State in Georgia, a guy named Brian Kemp, that he say why. They've been asking, going, hey, what's going on? Why aren't these in there? And evidently, lawyers for the Secretary of State and also the 3 counties who were the target of this lawsuit filed by this group claim that the law in Georgia doesn't set deadlines for processing voter registrations. They also emphasize that any voter unsure of their registration status can always cast a provisional ballot. Yeah, that's what you want to do. Those who do cast the provisional ballot, they have to come back and present additional documents. How many people are going to do that? I mean, stop thinking about it. It's hard enough getting people to come out on that Tuesday, but get them to come back by that Friday with quote unquote acceptable documents. When you filled out your registration card, you should have gotten it. What also is interesting is you got, these 40, 50,000 voters, who haven't received their registration cards in the mail to tell them where they go to vote. So help me with this, because this is what the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia is saying. Well, if you don't know if you're registered, you just go and vote. And if they don't let you vote, you do a provisional ballot. And I'm going, well, wait a second. Because the idea is to get you to run around in circles and chase your tail. Understand that. So you go to a precinct to cast your ballot. Like I go to the firehouse near my house and I cast my ballot. I know where it is and bang, I go. Let's say I've never voted. I signed up. I believe I'm registered. I go to vote. They say, well, you're not registered here. We're not even going to give you a provisional ballot because you're not supposed to be here. So maybe you're over at that other one in town. So go over the other across town. So you go over there to go cash. Sorry, no, you can't vote here. That's the point, to get you running in circles. And what's interesting to me, and again, another one of these moments where you go, the Secretary of State there, instead of saying, well, okay, well, these are these 40,000 or these 90,000 registrations. Here's what we did with them. Instead of saying, hey, this is what we did, people. No. They just point the finger back. Say, no, these are these groups. They're being fraudulent. In fact, they're trying to claim that the 90,000 ballot voter registrations are fraudulent. There was an investigation done that I found very interesting. They found that of the 85,000 forms that they looked at, 25 of them were confirmed wrong. They're saying forgeries. That would be a fraud rate of about 0.3 of 1/100th. That'd be a 300th of 1%. I mean, minuscule. And they were caught, which is why you go through the registration process. And I look at this and I think about it because anyone who's done a voter registration drive, and this is amazing to me that out of 85,000 or more than 85,000, they only found 25 that were quote unquote fraudulent. That's mind blowing to me, because as someone who's done voter registration drives, you get people who they don't want to tell you, no, I don't want to register. So they'll write down, Mickey Mouse or Babe Ruth or Hank Aaron, or they'll write down some screwy name. And then, make up an address, and they'll make up, so they turn something in. It kind of made me think about, you remember Acorn and how the Republicans loved it? Oh, Acorn was full of fraud. When the reality is Acorn actually pointed out the fraud. They actually pointed out the people who were screwing up, because here's what they did. And the Republicans do the same thing. Everyone does it. They pay people to go out and man the polls. They pay people to go out and man a booth and solicit people to register to vote. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm okay with it. But when you got back, you realize that, one guy who probably wasn't all that ambitious comes back with 100 filled out forms. You start to look at them and you realize that, wow, they're all in alphabetical order. How did that happen? They opened up a phone book and they copied down a bunch of addresses. And what Acorn had done is said, look, these are the ones we don't think are accurate. You need to check these. And in reality, the fraud, and this is one of those things that, nobody ever brought up except me on this program. The real fraud in that situation were the people who turned in the fraudulent registrations, and Acorn paid them. That's the fraud. They were paid to do work that they didn't do. And you would think that the right wing with their meritocracy would have been all over that, but no, it didn't mean that end. The end that they wanted met was attacking Acorn, was attacking a liberal progressive group or a working class group who was trying to have engagement of working people. Didn't fit the other frame. And to be honest, the right did a masterful job of destroying Acorn because they don't exist anymore. And again, the liberal media, where were they? Oh, they don't exist. That's right. And the great liberal president was nowhere around, and the liberals in Congress were nowhere around because they let him get thrown to the dogs. And as I look at this, you start and you think about, how does all this happen? Well, you go back to 2006. Georgia enacted one of the stricter voter ID laws. Sound familiar? A couple years later, they cut the number of early voting days you could get. 2012, this Secretary of State purged thousands of people off the voter rolls just before the 2012 presidential election. And then you had last month where the same guys, talking before a bunch of Republican activists, saying that, hey, there are more voters of color coming around, and that means if we don't do something, then them Democrats gonna win. And I look at this and I go, it's one of those moments where we, the people, should be throwing the bums out. Anybody who voted for the voter suppression law, honestly, anybody who voted for that should be gone. Because that tells you where they stand. They stand between you and your ballot box. And it may not be you today. And this is the thing that I keep trying to explain to folks. It may not be you right now today, but eventually it might be. Because I think of my grandmother. Basically, she's helpless. If it's not for my aunt taking her somewhere, she doesn't get to go anywhere. She's homebound. And my aunt's not going to take a day off work to drive her downtown in Cleveland to go get a voter ID when she doesn't have a driver's license. And I don't know that they take a 15-year-old expired driver's license as a form of ID. So she'd have to then go back and maybe try and find her birth certificate or who knows what. Because as I understand, they don't take electric bills or utility bills anymore, which is kind of what I remembered when I signed up to vote. But here again, it's not about encouraging people to vote. It's about discouraging voting. It's about holding down the other side. It's about Machiavellian politics. It's about gutting the other side in public. And that's, well, you got to give them credit. Mission accomplished. Quick break. Right back.
There's a flaw in the system, and the fly in the ointment is going to bring the whole thing down. The floodgates are open, we've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken, and we've fallen for the ruse.
Can you answer that question that you didn't answer on stage? Do you think man contributes to climate change or not?
Republican candidates still dodging the climate change question.
There is a personal cost paid by those families who live near coal mining sites.
Mountaintop removal coal mining promotes lung cancer. Another day, another oil spill, this time in Louisiana. 2014 is on track to be the hottest year on record. Plus, everything is awesome. Lego breaks up with Shell Oil.
All of those breakups and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Do you believe climate change in part is caused by activities of man?
Yes.
Wow, finally, a direct answer from a Tea Party candidate for governor of Connecticut.
But not the activities necessarily that some scientists believe they are.
No, brother. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, all campaign season long, we have been tracking these Republican candidates as they have been asked about climate change really for the first time in any election cycle. And the dodges and dancing has really been extraordinary to watch.
I know. It's kind of funny. Republican candidates have been trying to evade the question of whether they accept the scientific consensus on man-made global warming. Most recently, in the Connecticut governor's race, here's the Republican nominee, front-runner Tom Foley.
Mr. Foley, what do you think the cause of climate change is?
Well, what I've said is it doesn't really matter. It's happening. So if a leader and people in positions of public responsibility need to address a threat. So I don't think there's any debate about whether or not it's happening. So we have to find solutions.
So it's happening, perhaps by magic, but we need to do something about it. Okay, that's progress.
Connecticut's governor, Democrat Daniel Malloy, was unequivocal.
Of course it matters. And yes, we've had Irene and Sandy and storms in months that we've never had snow in before and amounts of snow that we've never seen before. Of course, climate change is real. Of course, it's beaten us up. Of course, it's cost us money. And to deny that is to deny reality.
He says deny reality like that's a bad thing or something.
Well, not to Joe Visconti, the Tea Party Republican running as an independent in the Connecticut governor's race. He's got news for scientists.
I believe we are in climate change, but it may not be global warming. There's a book called Chill. You all should look at it. Chill is the name of the book, and it talks about the fluctuations of the climate and actually moving more into a mini ice age.
Unbelievable, the dancing and dodging. How about just going with science?
Meanwhile, the real scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are also unequivocal. The planet is now on pace for 2014 to be the hottest year on record. The last 12-month period was the hottest 12-month stretch on record. And NOAA also says ocean warming is accelerating. Although some of these non-scientists claim we've had no global warming in 18 years, a NOAA scientist tells AP, quote, "No one bothered to tell the globe that." Now, the question is, if 2014 does end up being the hottest year on record, will the deniers stop saying we're in global cooling?
Of course not. Why would they? They've got fossil fuel industry money they need to make. These elections aren't just going to run themselves, Des.
Cleanup has begun after an oil pipeline rupture in a northern Louisiana bayou over the weekend dumped an estimated 170,000 gallons of crude oil into a residential area. Residents were evacuated, but 140 wild animals didn't get that warning and have been confirmed dead. Mountaintop removal coal mining again linked to lung cancer.
The federal government has to conduct a study on the health impact of mountaintop removal before it issues any more permits.
That was Representative John Yarmouth, Democrat of West Virginia, in a congressional hearing last July calling for a moratorium on federal permits for mountaintop removal coal mining. And not a moment too soon, a new West Virginia University study has found that the dust from mountaintop removal coal mining actually promotes the growth of lung cancer tumors. The study confirms previous research showing families living near coal operations have increased risk of cancer, birth defects, and early death. Dr. Matthew Wasson of Appalachian Voices tells Congress it's ample evidence for a federal moratorium on mountaintop removal.
There's too much information showing health problems to continue to ignore.
You know, when you've got a congressman from West Virginia, of all places, Democrat or not, calling for a moratorium on mountaintop removal coal mining, it seems like people ought to be standing up and paying attention.
Finally, some good news in a blow to Shell Oil's PR strategy to get its logo on children's toys. Lego has now announced it will not renew its contract with Shell Oil after a creepy viral video by Greenpeace depicting Lego toys drowning in oil.
Everything is awesome.
So no more of those little Shell Oil logos on my Lego set?
That's right.
That's just so sad. For much more on that story and all of the other ones we covered and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website where everything is awesome at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when you live a dream.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Vic Smith.
Run to the hills. Run for your lives. Run to the hills. Run for your lives.
Yes, run. Run from the uninformed, from the ignorant, from the dense. I look at this congressman from Utah, and again, it's another one of those moments where you go, how is this, this guy a congressman? And maybe it's just, he lives in the world, a very sheltered world where maybe they just don't know. Maybe that's what it is. But I look at this congressman from Utah who evidently was on fake news on Fox and talking about Ebola and how, and look, I think the president made a screw up as well. I don't think you appoint this Ron Klain, who I don't know what his other experience is other than being the former chief of staff to the vice president. I know it's not a medical background. I don't know that you take somebody who doesn't have a medical background and make them the Ebola czar. Just like I don't think you, and to bring this back to Bush, I don't think you appoint someone whose only experience in organizing people is something having to do with horses. Like Brownie, who was the head of FEMA. I don't think you put Brownie in head of a FEMA. I don't think you put this Klain guy in head of the Ebola czar. I think that's the Surgeon General's job. And oddly enough, so does this Republican congressman think that it should be the Surgeon General who does this. In fact, last week, this Representative Jason Chavez, the Republican from Utah, was on fake news on Fox. Whining about, and look, I'm with you. I think Klain was a bad choice. I would have, if it were me, I would have said that there's a moment of potential crisis. Senate, you have to come back and do your job. Senate, you have to come back and appoint my Surgeon General. You have to give him a vote one way or another. If it's a vote down, then we go and we find somebody else. But this is my guy. You have to give him a vote. That's what I would have done. And to be honest, that's the politically savvy thing, I think, to do. Now, do you hurt some Democrats from taking them off the campaign trail? Maybe. But you also put them in a position of they're doing something and they're acting in a moment of potential crisis. Either way, you've got this Jason Chavez, who was on fake news complaining that this Klain guy had not agreed to testify in front of Congress. Then went on to say, and this is one of those things where you go, you didn't just say that, did you? Yes, you did. Quote, why not have the Surgeon General head this up? He went on to say, at least you have someone who has a medical background, who has been confirmed by the United States Senate, and that's where we should be actually going. It should be actually, I think, going. Without actually knowing on his part that his Republican brethren in the Senate have filibustered Obama's candidate, Obama's nominee, this Vivek Murtha, by the way, who is a doctor. And the only reason that his confirmation is being held up, evidently, is because the NRA, the National Rifle Association, has a problem with him. Because he seems to believe that gun death violence is a public health issue. I have to be honest, I kind of agree with him. But it doesn't end there. And this is where, I was just having this conversation with my wife this afternoon. We were talking about the future of education and what we're hoping for our kids, and And look, it makes it sound so wonky and boring. What happened was the school sends out emails, and they send out an email with this Power School thing. It tells each class what homework assignments turned in, what her grades are for homework, for tests, for quizzes, everything. And it's a running tally of her grades, of my oldest daughter's grades. The other two will eventually get there. I have a problem with it, to be honest with you, because I think it forces parents to become helicopter parents, watching every single thing our kids are doing. And I have to say that, unfortunately, I do use it because I do get down on my daughter when there's an assignment not turned in that I know about in real time. No lying to dad or mom. But we were having this conversation because of this Power School, of these emails. So we're having this school about what our hopes are for the kids going forward. And I said, I had just read an article that this college up in Canada is talking about that we should stop information, cramming information into people's heads as we've done in the past. In the past, information was power. Information was something you paid for. But today we live in the information age where there's so much information, we don't know what the hell to do with it. And their argument was, and I kind of agree, their argument was that the next generation is not so much about gathering information, it's knowing what to do with it, knowing how to disseminate the information and being particular about what information you take, analyzing and separating the garbage from what may actually be good, because you have so much, you're inundated from every angle that, some of them are reliable sources, some maybe not so much. And you need to be able to have that filtration system that helps you weave through. And that's the future of education in this guy's opinion. And to a degree, I agree. There's part of me that says, I still want my kids to be, to have a field of academic knowledge that is at their fingertips, at their disposal. A friend didn't have a smartphone for a couple of months. I find that a very funny story, can't get around because doesn't have a map, because he used the iPhone everywhere he went. You'd see him wherever he was driving, checking the iPhone. Not having a map, not knowing how to ask for directions or follow the directions, because, Siri was to say, hey, make a left turn here. Never really thought of how to look for street signs or how to read street signs or any of that stuff. And, I remember him going, wow, I don't need any of that. I've got Siri, or I've got this, relying solely on technology. I fear that. And I don't want that for the kids, but I want them to be able to have like I said, a field of knowledge, and then to be able to weed through the garbage. And where this comes from is I look at fake news on Fox, which I really got to be honest, I view mostly as garbage. Garbage in, garbage out. This Chavez guy says this on fake news on Fox. And they don't really call him on it at the moment and say, well, Congressman, you do know that the Republicans are holding up a Surgeon General nominee, right? Calling him on this. They didn't do that from what I understand. So when they went back and they wrote up, because evidently they write up all of their guests, what the interview was about, to try and help you to go, hey, I want to watch this. And it's good. I wish I had the resources to be able to do that here at the program. But the article over at foxnews.com that evidently summarized this interview, according to the people at Think Progress, they've kind of changed the way it was worded in the article to kind of correct his error, according to the folks at Think Progress. It reports that the congressman called on Obama to nominate the acting Surgeon General, which according to them never came up. Now, maybe it came up in the part that went to commercial. I don't know. But according to them, in the video clip that I saw, there was no talk of it. Now, the guy who is the placeholder, this Boris Lusniak, he's the guy who's sitting in that, he doesn't receive Senate confirmation. Lishniak, who is the guy who's filling in because Murthy has been blocked, has not taken an active role in the Ebola response. That's what they're saying. And what the folks over at Think Progress say is still the mistake, and the political back and forth over Obama's response underlines the Republican strategy of criticizing everything Obama has done in the response. And do I think Obama's done everything right? No. Nor has he done everything wrong. I would have, like I said, I would have called the Senate back. I would have mandated a vote. If not on this guy, if not on the guy you want, at least then on this guy, so that you take that powerful position, because you don't want people freaking out. You don't want chaos. And to me, and as I've been saying, and for the last week, I was kind of mocking it in a very facetious manner. We're going to die. The end of the world's coming. Because I think it was blown to that kind of scare tactic level. So you read the report today that evidently on Friday after school in the Bronx, two African boys who I guess are from Senegal. Evidently, they were beaten up after school because, you're the Ebola kids. And I'm going, one, I don't know that you want to beat up two people whom you may believe. And this, I guess, shows where the brilliance is. You don't beat up somebody with Ebola. That's a transfer of fluid sometimes, and you really don't want that. But it sends that message that, there's something wrong with these people, and we're going to take care of them. We're going to beat them up. We're going to do this kind of stuff, and it seems dumb to me. But again, it comes back to, do we at some level have to blame the people in power? Because what frightens me is that they've got everybody all worked up. And I look at this story of this nurse in New Jersey, whom she had been exposed to the first traveler, the guy who was riding the subway and bowling, I guess. She had been exposed to this guy, so they put her into quarantine. And she did an interview with Candy Crowley on CNN that I saw, and she's saying, this is wrong, and this is a violation of my human rights, and all of this stuff. And you go, all of this fear mongering that's going on has created these extreme situations. Now, if she's really been exposed to it, I don't know that I want her out walking around. There's got to be a way of saying, okay, well, we have to make sure that this is something that isn't in our society. We don't want it to spread. But I got to be honest, I don't think I want her in a tent out in a courtyard with a porta potty in the middle. I just don't think I want that, because it could be any one of us. That sends a whole different message. But we need to have medical facilities that do this stuff. Because, when you stop and you think about some of the craziness that goes on around this, my fear is that you end up with hysteria. You end up with people, getting out the pitchforks because, we're going to save our kids. Or just dumb kids who are scared to death, like my daughter. I mean, honestly and truthfully, my daughter came home mortified. She really, honestly and truthfully believed that this was it. There's no point in doing my homework, Dad. We're not going to be around tomorrow. Ebola is coming for all of us. And just sitting down, having that conversation, I said, look, honey, you've got a much better chance of being hit by a city bus on our street. And city buses don't go on our street. You've got a much better chance of blowing your nose and dying than you do from catching Ebola, especially where we're at, and also having the resources that we have. Kids they get sick, we call the doctor. This, and I guess part of it, and as I tried to explain to her, the problem with Ebola is there's no money to be made in it. I would guarantee we'd have a cure, and you find out, you do a little research into it, where they almost had it. They figured out how to make sure that German scientist who got it in the laboratory, they figured out how to save him. And the other part of it, as I explained to her, is, look, you're talking about 2,400 people in West Africa, which is a horrible tragedy. But what about the 600,000 people who are dying from tuberculosis, and the hundreds of thousands who are dying from malaria, and the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who are dying of starvation? This, to me, is another one of those moments of fear. And as a society, and I go back to my conversation a moment ago about, disseminating and being able to filter through the noise. I think as a society, we've been too easily led astray. And we need to, and this is what's happened is, we've had this destruction of government and this attack on government to where the voices that we used to trust, the voices we used to listen to, we're finding out are wrong. And they've got a corporate agenda. And the question that I have quite often is, how do we come back from that? That's what's worrying to me. So, as we move forward, and like I said to my wife, I said, I'd like to find, if there are anybody know of any courses out there to help with critical thinking for young kids. I would love to know about them. I'd love to know about any summer programs that help go, disseminate information, look through information and filter. And there's got to be something, because I think that's the future, because, we're just inundated with messages. There's so much. I mean, even me, I go through so much a day. I read probably 300 articles a day of stuff. And it's just, it's overwhelming sometimes. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
And he said I was once like you, and I used to protest too, but the powers of be are too great, so walk away from the rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. At a Geneva, Switzerland Public Sector Unions Conference, the Trade in Services Agreement, or TISA, got a lot of attention. You may never have heard of TISA. It's not surprising, considering the secrecy in which the agreement affecting 70% of the world's trade in services is being negotiated. AFL-CIO Trade and Globalization Policy Specialist Celeste Drake told Canada's Radio Labour that TISA could have a huge impact on workers and the power of governments to legislate public services policy.
TISA and agreements like it do pose a real threat to workers and their families. The main problem is they are really made on the basis of corporate needs and desires, and it's what the corporations want. And when these agreements are made behind closed doors, where workers, consumers, environmental advocates, food advocates, public health advocates can't see the text, then we can't really have a strong impact on what the outcomes are. And then the corporate agenda gets advanced. And what happens is slowly, sort of agreement by agreement by agreement, the policy space for governments is diminished.
First student school bus drivers in Oakland, California are looking forward to their first work under a labor contract as Teamsters. The drivers voted to join Teamsters Local 853. 150 drivers transport students in the Oakland Unified School District. The drivers and monitors at First Student in Oakland will be covered by the Teamsters National Master Agreement with First Student.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. In a few hours, they're going to play Game 3 of the 2014 World Series, which maybe you've heard is for the championship of professional baseball. Or maybe you haven't heard that, because from looking at the all-important TV ratings, practically no one is watching the Fall Classic. In fact, the first two games between the San Francisco Giants and the Kansas City Royals had some of the worst ratings in World Series history. But it's not really surprising. Once called our national pastime, baseball has morphed into strictly a regional sport. Without a major market team in this series, it largely goes unnoticed, as it is now, even with the Cinderella Royals playing in their first series since 1985 against a Giants team that is trying to nail down their third title in the last 5 seasons. But unless you followed baseball this season, you probably have no idea that the two teams only qualified for the postseason as wildcard teams by first winning a one-game play-in playoff game. The Royals beat the A's to start what became a record 8-game winning streak, and the Giants defeated Pittsburgh before going on to post-series wins against the Nationals and Cardinals. But here they are, each trying to win the World Series, if anyone cares to watch. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So evidently last night in the home of Superman, Metropolis, Illinois, they had a leak of some sort of this uranium-type chemical that in a minute we're going to find out what it was. But the company spokesperson says that this leak that they had never left the site, never left the premises. And I saw the video, and there was this huge plume of smoke above the facility, and you could see it kind of going away. So I gotta wonder what never left the facility, what that actually means. And I read this report, and it also that came from the World Nuclear News. These are the people who are supposed to be following this stuff. All they actually did with the story was, well, cut and paste the press release by Honeywell, of which, as we've talked about on this program a number of times, this is a company that's locked their employees out numerous times over contract negotiations. And they're the only company in the country. This is the only facility that makes this particular thing. So you would think you would want the most educated, the best trained, the most reliable workforce in place so these things don't happen. That's why I've asked John Paul Smith. He's the media secretary for United Steelworkers Local 7-669. He's also the chair of the Health and Safety Committee. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So I look at this, and again, we talked not too long ago about the lockout again, and now we're talking about another one of these releases of some sort. Again, this seems to be a pattern to me, John.
It's a definite pattern. It's a definite cause for concern. And the leak last night, the response, both from the company and from the local emergency disaster service, was just utterly ridiculous. Our community last night could have or may have been, for all we know, but could have been exposed before they were even notified of a threat. And that's very concerning to us, along with the other issues.
Well, if you're going to die, it's probably best you don't know. But let me ask you about what was released, because I don't think most people, I don't actually know what it is. This uranium hexafluoride, is that the chemical?
Yeah, uranium hexafluoride is what we convert as a finished product there at the facility, and they convert uranium ore. Some people call it, or it's known as yellow cake, from mines around the world. They convert it using both hydrofluorine or hydrogen fluoride and fluorine to a product called UF6. Now UF6, when it escapes like it did and then mixed with water that they use to knock it down, converts back to the uranium, falls out, and then the hydrofluoric acid vapor will move through the air. And that's kind of what you see in the videos and the pictures.
Ooh, that's horrible stuff. I for a couple of years, I had done some first responder work and taken a number of the courses that came for the company I worked for. And that's one of the things that the guy who did the training course said you just never want to get on you, because it just, I guess, eats all of the calcium out of your bones and basically just turns you into a pile of mush.
Yeah, hydrogen fluoride or hydrofluoric acid will burn you from the inside out. It's a calcium seeker. And so it's definitely bad stuff. And we didn't have an immediate response last night because we wanted to gather facts. We're often accused of overreacting or exaggerating things that happen. So we wanted to gather all of the correct information first. But what we did see is that the uranium hexafluoride left the process building for at least 6 minutes before the mitigation towers were activated. And the video of that will be released in the morning with Politico, and then to national news sites after that. Also, the company claimed that the release never left the site. In one of the other videos, you can clearly see the cloud of vapor leaving the site. Numerous 911 calls were made, and the 911 dispatcher told regular citizens were out there calling 911, not just our guys. And dispatcher told 911 that the company, whose spokesperson is in New Jersey, and the NRC, whose office is in Atlanta, they do not have an on-site inspector, said that everything was under control as these people are watching the cloud leave the facility.
Wow. And I got to wonder, how much of this is, the fact that we don't have a regulator on the ground. I would think, and you can help me here if you think I'm wrong, but I would think being the only facility in the country that does what you do, and the fact that, as you pointed out, you use this yellow cake uranium, and this product that you make is so specific and I think dangerous, that you would have someone that, the people would say, a regulator or someone who watches this stuff would be right there just in case.
You would think so, and especially during a labor dispute. You'll definitely think so whenever you have some less experienced people running the facility. And you might find this interesting, the listeners might find this interesting, is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is not funded by the United States government. They receive all of their funding from their licensees. And so Honeywell pays the NRC to regulate them. And a lot of these people that are on the commission end up taking jobs in the industry. And so there's a gigantic conflict of interest on really hammering a company that's doing wrong if you think it's a potential employer.
Oh, don't tell me it's not so. I mean, it's what we've done to a lot of our regulatory bodies, John. I mean, a lot of the people that are supposed to be overseeing the industries are just waiting for that turnstile so they can collect the big job, either with the SEC or any of the OSHA people. I'm frustrated as all can be by how things have turned out.
Sure, and our local U.S. representative, John Shimkus, has refused to step in during a labor dispute, although he has taken $19,999.99 in campaign contributions from Honeywell, as well as Mitch McConnell, whose state is about 1 mile on the other side of the river, on the Ohio River there, and about half of our permanent workforce comes from Kentucky, has also refused to step in. And we've called on Senator McConnell to demand an independent investigation over this incident as well.
I mean, that's the least that I think should happen, to find out, one, why it happened, and how you make how you make it never happen again. And let me ask you this: does this happen if you don't have inexperienced people on the job site?
The equipment malfunction may have happened anyway. I can't speak to that, but the response would have been completely different. As our workforce has decades of experience responding to emergencies, as opposed to people who've worked there, a lot of them less than a year. Responding to an emergency. And so there's definitely an experience factor in there. And you learn early in your career there not to panic, but you learn that from people who've done it with you for decades.
And it's that response that I think is so important, because a bad situation can turn worse with the wrong response. And I got to be honest with you, if I lived in your community, I don't think I'd be all that comfortable. If someone, especially as someone who doesn't know anything about it, I don't know that I would be all that comfortable. One, living in your community just because of that place, but two, having this situation go on.
It's bad, and it's sad that it took this situation that happened last night for community members to speak out, which they began to do last night and into today. And there's a coal terminal, a coal mixing terminal down the facility down the highway from Honeywell. And last night during the event, that coal terminal, their employees were put on lockdown to shelter in place in case the release worsened, which is probably what they should have done. But there are homes between the facilities, and not a single citizen was notified on what was happening.
And that should be a huge headline story, because when I Googled, when I tried to gather stories on this, there were a handful of spattering of stories. In fact, the AP story was probably about 75 words at best. That this happened and the company says everything's going to be okay. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission has been notified. That's what it is. They said the plant helps make nuclear fuel and is still operating, even though they claim there's no evidence of the leak after the fact.
Right. Hopefully after tomorrow it will be a larger headline. And that was a large issue we had last night, is we had media sources, mainly local media sources, just completely repeating company statements, doing no reporting of themselves, did not send a reporter on the scene until today. Is just a large issue. And the Regulatory Commission was going to take the company's word for it and allow them to continue to operate, not even send an inspector, until we called them and sent them the videos we had. We got word back today that they are going to shut the facility down until they get an inspector in there and their inspection is complete.
Good on you.
So for the moment, they're going to shut it down. But even right at first, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was just going to kind of take the company's word for it and let them continue to operate.
That's amazing. I mean, that's really amazing, especially when it's your job to be overseeing this stuff and to keep the public safe. I mean, I understand a news reporter not wanting to go to an area where this uranium hexafluoride or whatever it is in the air. I can understand not wanting to be part of that. But when it's your job to be the overseer of this, to make sure that everyone's safe, I have a serious problem with it.
We do as well, and that's another issue with the licensees funding the commission, and it kind of almost puts them in bed together, and we have a real issue with that.
Now, if I remember right, and help me if I'm wrong, but you guys have been locked out like 3 times over the last 5 years, right?
Twice. In the last 4 years. Yeah, correct. Twice in the last 4 years, and this is work that the equipment that malfunctioned, that would have been equipment that our union would have installed in-house prior to the first lockout. And I can't say that we could have did something different, but in the history of the plant, whenever we installed that equipment, we have never had the malfunction that they had last night.
So, I mean, just common logic will tell you, if you've got somebody who doesn't know exactly what they're doing and they're not the one actually working with this stuff every day, they may cut corners and not doing it as well as someone whose life may depend on it being done right, if I'm hearing what you're saying.
Right. And, this is our community, not Honeywell's community. And last night we had to stand on the other side of the fence, watch this release blow to the east into our community and, have the feeling of helplessness because we aren't allowed to go in there and stop it.
So what's this going to do for the contract negotiations? Now, I understand, again, you've been locked out. This is not a strike. This is not of your doing. This is the company saying, take the conditions we're putting on the table, or we're going to kick you to the curb, correct?
Correct. And we meet with them again November 17th. Apparently, that was the first day that they're available to meet with us again. But we're going to meet with them November 17th, and this will be the first topic we discuss, the outright disregard for the facts and putting our community at risk without giving our citizens any notification of the threat.
Yeah, at some point, if you're a member of the community, don't you start asking the question whether Honeywell should be the company making this stuff in the community and maybe looking at trying to maybe find somebody else?
That would certainly, I would think, be an option. And, we question a lot. And our union, the United Steelworkers, is calling for an immediate town hall meeting for an explanation of the events and a forum for citizens to voice their concerns over how it was handled.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at this, and again, part of me says this is another one of those moments that you look at our labor laws and how broken and fractured they are that give these companies so much power over a community and over a workforce. And, with the election coming up, this should be an issue, I think, on the front of everyone's mind, especially in your neck of the woods.
I would think so. And, we have a candidate running that is 100% behind labor, but I try to keep it separate from political issue, although it is. And we have this conversation a lot that if a company wants to inflict pain or damage upon workers, they can do so immediately. And if workers ever see justice, it takes years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to me. So let me ask you last line of questioning. I think the last lockout was what, a year and a half, something like that?
14 months.
14 months. Do you expect this to be another one of a repeat of the last one, or is there some hope?
It's hard to say about a repeat. We're going to, see what the events of last night, what that does to things. But we're prepared for the lockout to last one day longer than the company wants it to last, and we have to keep that stance.
I'm right there with you, and I wish you the absolute best in how this goes down the road. And as it continues down the road, I'd love to have you come back and talk to us about what's going on.
Anytime, Rick.
John, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much. John Paul Smith, United Steelworkers, 7-669 media secretary. He's also the chair of their health and safety committee. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
One of these days we're gonna wake up and find a new day. One of these days we wanna wake up and make a new way. One of these days.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 for Monday, October 27th, 2014. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. As we begin the week, let's look back on 3 major elections held on Sunday. In Ukraine, parliamentarians loyal to President Petro Poroshenko scored major victories, signaling, in the president's words, a desire to deepen ties with Europe. Yesterday, I asked you to vote for Democratic, reformist, pro-Ukrainian, and pro-European majority. Thank you for hearing and supporting this call. More than 3/4 of voters, a constitutional majority, powerfully and irreversibly supported the course towards Europe. Tunisia also conducted peaceful parliamentary elections on Sunday, handing the country's secular Nida Tounes party the most seats in the newly created National Assembly. The Islamist Ennahda Party, which soared in popularity following the Arab Spring, placed second. Voters will go to the polls on November 23rd to elect a new president. And in Brazil, incumbent President Dilma Rousseff earned herself 4 more years in office. It was thought the election could see an upset, with the centrist candidate Acio Neves portraying himself as better equipped to manage the social welfare programs bolstered during Rousseff's first term. Rousseff is credited with expanding the welfare rolls in the country, but she's faced criticism for declining education and health standards. In her victory speech, Rousseff pledged to undertake urgent action to, quote, resume our rhythm of growth, and she also committed to kickstarting industrial production and increasing salaries. After 12 years in office, Rousseff's Workers' Party will need to deliver on those promises in order to hold back mounting opposition in the years ahead. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
I've talked about several aspects of America's Declaration of Independence before, but this time we'll focus on its powerful significance. In the spring of 1776, an honest analysis would show very little hope of George Washington's militia defeating the British Army. The number of militiamen was small, and most that chose to take up arms were not prepared for battle. Further, the general populace in the colonies had regional suspicions and jealousies which made for a very fragile alliance. But unity in military battles do not alone make a revolution. Some revolutions build up strength through abstract feelings and inspirations that are difficult to explain. What Bob Dylan, for example, wrote, "There was revolution in the air." Members of the Continental Congress were beginning to move past their regional issues, and some felt the responsibility to form a new nation. Join us again for Richard Henry Lee. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome to the new dark ages. Yeah, I hope you're living right. These are the new dark ages. And the world might end tonight.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So today, back in 1904, the New York subway system opened up, the first rapid transit system in the U.S. More than 100 workers died during the construction of the first 13 miles of tunnel and track. But today opened up 1904. And you think about it, 110 years ago. And, you know, I keep saying, you know, we should be expanding our public transit network and investing in our future. What's interesting about this is more than 100 people died building this first 13 miles. And to me, it's one of these moments where you look back at our history and go, you know, going to work was extremely dangerous before. It's dangerous today, but it used to be worse. And why was it worse? Well, because you didn't have any regulators. You didn't have any laws protecting workers. They pursued this idea of liberty of contract. Well, if you're willing to go out there and put yourself at risk and at peril and in these horrible situations, well, you chose to. Your own fault. Now we, through regulation, through policy, have taken some of that away. But with all of this attack on job killing regulations, I keep asking what happens when we go back to the days of the lack of people, the lack of regulation killing people. And you know, this is what unions helped stop. More than 100 people dying. And what you've got is a movement of folks in this country who are really trying to take us back to those days. Amazing stuff. Also today, 1935, 3 strikes on public works projects were going on in Maryland because, back then, evidently, there was supposed to be a minimum wage paid with the Works Projects Administration. Evidently, they were only paying about 28% an hour, far less than was possible on direct relief. So they wanted folks, they wanted the wage to go up to 50 cents an hour as a minimum wage. And you had civic leaders and public officials in Cumberland County, Maryland, who were supporting it, saying, look, you should pay a decent wage. And I'm of the same mindset. I'm of the mindset we go back and we think those things of the past, again, such as full employment policies and public employment, that if you can't find a job in the so-called private sector, that there's plenty of public sector work that needs to be done. And with that, you make those jobs reasonable living wage jobs, thus pulling up the private sector. The right wing of this country scared the death of that because that would give workers options. And for me, I think a huge infrastructural improvement would be moving us to a greener, cleaner economy. Investing in I don't know, putting people to work, caulking granny's windows, preparing land for solar panels, or putting solar panels on malls or schools or whatever, training people to do that work. Interestingly enough, Anastasia Pantos over at EcoWatch, she had a list of the top 10 greenest cities in the world. And I have to be honest, I was rather shocked that there was a U.S. company in the top 10. I was expecting it to be mostly Scandinavian countries, and which most of them are: Copenhagen, Amsterdam, Stockholm, the top 3, Vancouver, number 4, London, Berlin, and then New York City, perhaps surprising, the greenest large city in the U.S. According to the report, its greenhouse gas emission is low for a city of its size, and its population relies on extensive public transit system that they invested in 110 years ago. The city itself has put in place a green building initiative. Also on the top 10, you had Singapore, Helsinki, and Oslo. That's what I said. Same thing. And, not surprising to me where the green cities are. New York did surprise me. And I keep saying, we need to be pushing for that. There should be 4 cities on that top 10. But we don't have the political will yet. I think we should. I think we can. That's what elections are about. And what's interesting to me is I have conversations with people all the time about alternative energy. And, we're fed this, it's got to be coal, it's got to be gas, and it's got to be nuclear, it's got to be all of these things. And I go, well, do you not have an open mind to alternatives? Because we've all been sold this idea that, well, we couldn't do it all on solar, so we shouldn't do it at all, which is nuts. I mean, what we've been spoon-fed, nuts. So because we can't do it all with one thing, we shouldn't do it at all? Is that the argument? Yeah, that's what they come back with. Same thing with wind power or tidal or geothermal or any of this stuff. If you can't do it all of it, then we shouldn't do it at all. And I keep going back to this idea that, Obama says he's got this, all of the above strategy. Well, all of the above should include solar and wind. And I was reading an article earlier this morning that said in Kansas, Governor Brownback is in big trouble because he's turned his back on wind and solar. And I would argue, yeah, that's probably true. He's turned his back on solar and wind, but he's also done a horrible job. They followed the same. And Brownback's one of those guys who didn't get the headlines like Walker or Scott or Snyder or even Corbett for that matter. as insane governors, but followed the same policies. In fact, took some of them to the absolute extreme. And I look at the beggar thy neighbor economic development that has just killed Kansas, and with it, Missouri. And you go, the wind part, yeah, it's going to hurt, but the other stuff just as bad. And for me, I'm of the mindset that, you know what, let's figure out how to get us off of the dirty stuff, just because on a common sense level, burning stuff, not very good for you. Just a thought. Anyway, let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Ain't gonna take it, it's our time. We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Stay alive.
Can you answer that question that you didn't answer on stage? Do you think man contributes to climate change or not?
Republican candidates still dodging the climate change question.
There is a personal cost paid by those families who live near coal mining sites.
Mountaintop removal coal mining promotes lung cancer. Another day, another oil spill, this time in Louisiana. 2014 is on track to be the hottest year on record. Plus, everything is awesome. Lego breaks up with Shell Oil.
All of those breakups and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Do you believe climate change in part is caused by activities of man?
Yes.
Wow, finally, a direct answer from a Tea Party candidate for governor of Connecticut.
But not the activities necessarily that some scientists believe they are.
No, brother. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, all campaign season long, we have been tracking these Republican candidates as they have been asked about climate change, really for the first time in any election cycle. And the dodges and dancing has really been extraordinary to watch.
I know. It's kind of funny. Republican candidates have been trying to evade the question of whether they accept the scientific consensus on man-made global warming. Most recently, in the Connecticut governor's race, here's the Republican nominee, front-runner Tom Foley.
Mr. Foley, what do you think the cause of climate change is?
Well, what I've said is it doesn't really matter. It's happening. So if a leader and people in positions of public responsibility need to address a threat. So I don't think there's any debate about whether or not it's happening. So we have to find solutions.
So it's happening, perhaps by magic, but we need to do something about it. Okay, that's progress.
Connecticut's governor, Democrat Daniel Malloy, was unequivocal.
Of course it matters. And yes, we've had Irene and Sandy and storms and months that we've never had snow in before and amounts of snow that we've never seen before. Of course, climate change is real. Of course, it's beating us up. Of course, it's cost us money. And to deny that is to deny reality.
He says deny reality like that's a bad thing or something.
Well, not to Joe Visconti, the Tea Party Republican running as an independent in the Connecticut governor's race. He's got news for scientists.
I believe we are in climate change, but it may not be global warming. There's a book called Chill. You all should look at it. Chill is the name of the book, and it talks about the fluctuations of the climate and actually moving more into a mini ice age.
Unbelievable, the dancing and dodging. How about just going with science?
Meanwhile, the real scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are also unequivocal. The planet is now on pace for 2014 to be the hottest year on record. The last 12-month period was the hottest 12-month stretch on record. And NOAA also says ocean warming is accelerating. Although some of these non-scientists claim we've had no global warming in 18 years, a NOAA scientist tells AP, quote, "No one bothered to tell the globe that." Now, the question is, if 2014 does end up being the hottest year on record, will the deniers stop saying we're in global cooling?
Of course not. Why would they? They've got fossil fuel industry money they need to make. These elections aren't just going to run themselves, Des.
Cleanup has begun after an oil pipeline rupture in a northern Louisiana bayou over the weekend dumped an estimated 170,000 gallons of crude oil into a residential area. Residents were evacuated, but 140 40 wild animals didn't get that warning and have been confirmed dead. Mountaintop removal coal mining again linked to lung cancer.
The federal government has to conduct a study on the health impact of mountaintop removal before it issues any more permits.
That was Representative John Yarmouth, Democrat of West Virginia, in a congressional hearing last July calling for a moratorium on federal permits for mountaintop removal coal mining. And not a moment too soon, a new West Virginia University study has found that the dust from mountaintop removal coal mining actually promotes the growth of lung cancer tumors. The study confirms previous research showing families living near coal operations have increased risk of cancer, birth defects, and early death. Dr. Matthew Wasson of Appalachian Voices tells Congress it's ample evidence for a federal moratorium on mountaintop removal.
There's too much information showing health problems to continue to ignore.
You know, when you've got a congressman from West Virginia, of all places, Democrat or not, calling for a moratorium on mountaintop removal coal mining, it seems like people ought to be standing up and paying attention.
Finally, some good news in a blow to Shell Oil's PR strategy to get its logo on children's toys. Lego has now announced it will not renew its contract with Shell Oil after a creepy viral video by Greenpeace depicting Lego toys drowning in oil.
Everything is awesome.
So no more of those little Shell Oil logos on my Lego set?
That's right.
That's just so sad. For much more on that story and all of the other ones we covered and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website where everything is awesome at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when you live a dream.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Well, Halloween's just around the corner. Kids really excited. In fact, my daughter asked me, Dad, do I have to go to basketball practice if they have basketball on Thursday night so I can go trick-or-treating? Even though when I was a kid, trick-or-treat was Friday night because it was on the actual day. I don't know when we've become such wimps. And, oh, no, it has to be on a school night. Oh, idiotic. Just about as idiotic as Kirk Cameron, the former Growing Pains TV child star. Evidently, he believes that that Halloween is a Christian holiday. And that Christians should embrace the Halloween spirit and say that it was Jesus overcoming death. That's really messed up and just insane. Anyway, and I don't even, Jesus. Let's find out what's going on around the world. And in Washington, D.C., Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here. You know, that's kind of a hard one. I don't even think that's like historically accurate at all. You know, I mean, like the Catholic Church at one point tried to co-opt Halloween and make it about All Saints and whatnot. That's supposed to be a holiday to celebrating all of that stuff.
Yep.
Of course, no one really followed that, but that was just a kind of way to try to trick non-believers into participating and whatnot. But yeah, weird stuff.
No, I'm just, it's one of those things I thought I was going to go into a whole little bit about it. And I just go, you know what? It's so insane that it's not even worth it.
Yeah, that's. I mean, this is Kirk Cameron we're talking about.
Yeah, and the fact that anybody would even, I look at Pat Robertson, same thing. I don't know why anybody would listen to him either. So if you're going to listen to Pat Robertson, why not Growing Pains guy? Anyway, let's find out what's going on. Ebola, everyone going to die?
I mean, eventually, yeah.
Okay.
But whether or not it's going to be from Ebola, we don't really quite know. But yeah, no, we have some interesting developments on that front. We have some interesting standoffs happening between New York and New Jersey and some members of sort of the healthcare community. There was a mandatory 21-day curfew that was initially called forth for both New Jersey and New York, with both governors standing by that. Today, however, they appeared to have softened that relatively so. Instead of having it be a mandatory 21-day curfew in a hospital, they rearranged it so that it could take place at the individual healthcare workers' homes. And meanwhile, we're seeing the White House sort of not standing by their decisions or not promoting them, but rather saying that they're giving leeway to states to make the decision here, even though they have, previously gone on record saying that it could create a dangerous precedent if we have these sort of draconian mandatory curfews.
Well, we're using the 10th Amendment argument. States' rights issue. This is, if you want to quarantine your people, you should be able to do it on a state level. But I look at this and I wonder how much of this has to do with the interview and the woman who was being quarantined saying it's a violation of her civil rights.
I mean, I think it's a large portion of it. This is something that no American really would actually feel comfortable, being taken away and whatnot. So I think that plays a large portion of it. It's also the idea that you're sort of, criminalizing behavior that is essentially helping people. You're providing, you're providing healthcare services for, a continent that needs it, and then you're, coming back home and being put in a pretty perilous and, constitutionally questionable situation. So I think that sort of rubbed a lot of people on the right the wrong way. And lo and behold, not long after the interview, we actually saw an event at the Heritage Foundation today, which is typically, considerably right-wing, saying that the mandatory quarantines are in fact not a helpful step and are essentially not founded in any scientific evidence.
No, I vacillate between the two positions. One, it's the same thing with the travel ban. You turn people into liars, and I don't agree with that. But then the question becomes: in a city like New York, the largest city in this country, what happens if you get one person who's riding the subway or going bowling who's infected, and now you have this stream of infections that now become potentially an epidemic?
Exactly, and that's really the sort of tightrope that needs to be walked here. So you kind of nailed that pretty much exactly for why this is such a tough situation. It's kind of hard to give a right answer to that. That's going to be agreeable to both public health officials as well as the greater public safety and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that's going to be watched closely. But luckily, it looks like it's probably going to be a pretty moot point since. I believe we had another Ebola patient today appearing to not have any symptoms. So,
well, it's a good thing. I mean, at the end of it, though, as someone who may be, and this is where I've said, as someone who is from that area, who has come from an area where you're potentially exposed to it, don't you have some type of self-quarantine away from your family at least? I mean, if you don't give a rat's behind about the guy next to you on the bus, what about your kids and your spouse and your parents and your family? What about them?
Right. And again, this is something you can only get through the exchange of, bodily fluids and whatnot, and it's only contagious after symptoms start to show.
Right.
So I'm hoping particularly with public health officials, if they actually had these kind of symptoms, they would do the responsible thing.
Yeah, we'll see.
You have to, they're placing, too much hope in any human being.
Yeah, well, at the end of it, I don't think locking anybody up is a good idea either, because it could be me. And I don't think I'd want that either. Let's move along. I guess there are some 12 Nobel Peace Prize winners pressing Obama on torture.
Yeah, this was something that came up today. There was there was 12 Nobel Prize winners for peace who today penned a letter and sent to the president, essentially asking him to give an open assessment of how the U.S. Essentially, as Obama put it, tortured some folks overseas. This is, of course, coming up on the just up ahead of a report that's going to be released by the Senate Intelligence Committee, detailing CIA extradition practices and enhanced interrogation practices and flat-out torture, to put it frankly. And that currently has been going through some redactions behind the scenes from the CIA, who's essentially trying to make it basically unreadable. So this was something that's coming up before that to draw some attention to it. This was signed by Desmond Tutu, as well as as well as a number of other prominent international figures, trying to rally support both for the idea of opening up that sort of investigative process and releasing a well-founded report, and also calling on him to shut down Guantanamo Bay and to put forward some policies that will strictly ensure that human rights violations are not occurring under international law.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those campaign promises. I often wonder why he's still not being pressed on. I could, I remember right, that was one of the things in 2008 that he was running on, closing down Guantanamo. And I'm still wondering why that hasn't happened.
No, it absolutely was, and that's something that is, pretty ridiculous that it's, still being talked about today, considering how much of an emphasis he put on, both the notion of that and removing troops from Iraq, which both we, can kind of view as laughable today. So yeah, no, that's something that of course is going to be, probably an issue for a number of years to come if there's not any last minute action. And it seems like lawmakers in general are the ones who are sort of, spineless when it comes to this, considering nobody was really willing to let this happen in their backyard. And we got quite a bit of congressional support for legislative language to even to prohibit even moving and or transferring Guantanamo Bay detainees.
Now, one of my Tea Party friends asked me if now they're going to take back the Nobel Peace Prize that Obama got, which I got to be honest, I never thought he should have gotten in the first place, just because I don't think any sitting U.S. president should have something like that, because you never know. But he did ask the question: did they then take it back?
I don't think there's a process to take back a Nobel Peace Prize, but I think it would. Certainly do him well to sort of share his thoughts on this and maybe acknowledge the fact that he probably shouldn't have received it, considering the steps he was going to have to take as president in terms of a wide array of military action and supporting essentially war of choices when it came to situations like Libya and Syria and whatnot. So that's something that I'm sure is going to be asked at the at the end of his presidency, and until then, we can only just kind of try to speculate what's going on in his head, being both a wartime president as well as a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Yeah, that's it's interesting the way you put that. A war president and it just seems to be opposite ends of the spectrum. And finally, evidently, the guy who jumped the fence to run to the White House, they've ruled him incompetent to stand trial. Is that true?
Yep, that happened today. This is the second individual who jumped over the fence. Dominic and Savannah, who was also being charged for assaulting two police dogs once he jumped over the fence. He was in the court here in D.C. today, and at one point he protested the judge's ruling, standing up, yelling, "Stop! You're not going to do this to me!" And having a pretty dramatic outbreak from the reporters who I spoke to who were in the courtroom with him before being let off. So. There we go. That's, more of the drama from some of our more colorful characters here in DC.
So he assaulted the dogs. How did he assault the dogs? I mean, I was.
Yeah. I think he kicked them when they were trying to
bite him.
Take him down. Yeah. So, if you do that to a cop when you're, trying to protect yourself and stuff, you'll get slammed with resisting arrest and assault and not in a heartbeat. So
unless you get shot first.
There we go.
Because I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for the grand jury's edict to come down and the riots to begin.
Yeah. That's the sort of unfortunate sort of lingering sense that I have as well. Even though I'd like to, hold out hope, but it's not looking good.
So I know this was the last thing, but are you going to head back to Ferguson if it goes down the other way to where the rioting begins? I know you were there the last time. Will you go back again?
Yes, I will probably. If it's a situation that calls for it, if we see rioting again and whatnot. I'll do it reluctantly. However, since last time I was down there, I ended up getting tear gassed and shot at with rubber bullets and just essentially put through a lot more stress than I was expecting. So at least this time I'll be going with a gas mask and a bicycle helmet to make sure I'm at least considerably safer.
There you go. Well, I give you credit for having less brains than I do. So good for you. Justin, always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Hey, you too.
Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back after this.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
When 5 Supreme Court justices decreed that corporations are entitled to full free speech rights in our elections, and that corporate money is a form of speech that cannot be restricted, they produced a nightmare tsunami of that is now drowning our people's democratic rights. After all, if money is speech, then speech is no longer free. It's for sale. This year, we're seeing what the court's absurd edict is costing us. First, the corporate purchase of political speech has in fact reached tsunamic force in the current congressional races. Spending on TV ads will likely top $2 billion, 70% higher than 4 years ago when the court issued its Citizen United money ruling. Second, the bulk of this speech is not being bought by candidates or parties, but by secretive outside front groups that hide the corporate interest funding the ads. In Senate races alone, these shadow groups have already run some 150,000 TV spots. The Koch brothers' main front group, Americans for Prosperity, is by far the biggest buyer of speech, having laid out $44 million on congressional races in just the first 6 months of this election year. Third, and most pernicious, the court-created right of moneyed front groups to flood the airwaves has handed them the power to dictate any campaign's message. The ads of those secret fronts now define the issues and even the candidates themselves before the race really gets going. Worse, because the outside groups are anonymous, their speech consists almost entirely of the nastiest, most vituperative attacks on candidates they oppose, turning our election year discourse into a toxic slime fest that turns off voters and shrivels turnout. This is Jim Hightower saying, to join others and help stop the corporate purchase of the people's political speech rights, connect with movetoamend.org. That's www.movetoamend.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
There's a high school girl with a bourgeois dream, just like the pictures in the magazine she found on the floor of the laundromat. A woman with kids can forget all that. If she comes up pregnant, what'll she do? Forget the career and forget about school. Can she live on faith, live on hope, high on Jesus or hooked on dope? When it's way too late to just say no, you can't make it here anymore.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. One of my favorite crazy ads of this election season, outside of the dresses, I know the Republican Governors Association had put out the ad of the dresses, where they went around to all the states and, would you wear the Tom Wolfe dress or the Mary Burke dress or the Charlie Crist dress? Or would you like to have the wonderfully beautiful, oh my goodness, Tom Corbett dress? I don't even know where to go with that other than just to laugh. So you take it from the perspective of, you wonder why younger women and women in general look at the Republican Party with a jaundiced eye. The contraceptive thing being, front and foremost, and then throw in legitimate rape on top of that. And you look at some of the insanity that's come out of their mouth. And this woman from Fox News saying that young women, they should just be hot and go back on Tinder and on Match.com. They shouldn't vote or serve on juries. Kind of made me go, this is one of those crazy times. I love those ads, but I think my favorite is this right-wing nut, this Joni Ernst from Iowa. And sadly, I think she's got a real shot of winning, which scares me a lot. I really, you go from one of the most decent human beings you'll meet on the planet, Tom Harkin, who I just think it was a fantastic senator and a good guy all the way around. I had the chance to meet him several times, and just a really a decent guy with a good family story. To this woman, who evidently, vote for me because I castrated hogs, and I can go to Washington and I can make them squeal. I just thought it was got to give him credit. It was funny. It was a funny ad. A little crazy, but funny. Now she has jumped out a little bit as well, saying that she has a beautiful little Smith & Wesson 9mm, and it goes with me virtually everywhere. She says, I believe I have the right to defend my family, myself and my family, whether it's from an intruder or it's from my government. Should they decide that my rights are no longer important? And I sit here and I go, there's this right-wing fantasy, this right-wing extremist fantasy. We're gonna come together just like in the good old days, and we're gonna militia ourselves up, and we're gonna go after their government. And it's crazy people like this who could be in the Senate. Now, do I think she really believes that? I really don't think so. But she feels the need to go and say things like that so that the wingnuts will vote for her. That scares me. Scares me a lot. And finally for today, if you get sick, if you catch this neurovirus, chances are you got it because the person who served you your meal, according to the CDC, person who served your meal was sick, and they passed it on to you. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, a report back in June pointed out that about 20 million people are going to get sick because of the neurovirus, and that the number one way to fix that is, maybe the food service industry should do something about it. They say that the common source is contaminated food. So if an infected worker, who are frequently the sources of these outbreaks, touch ready-to-eat foods served in restaurants with their bare hands, voila, you are now sick. Symptoms, they say, are generally stomach pain, nausea, and diarrhea. No, I don't know about fever, because then you go, well, if I get the fever, does that mean Ebola? Am I going to die? Well, this is just stomach pain. It's what we used to call a stomach bug. Neurovirus particulates are spread whenever an infected person vomits or defecates, which kind of makes you want to just run out and go to a fast food restaurant, because swallowing just 18 neurovirus particles can sicken a new host. The virus spreads easily, especially when the infected patient is preparing food for a lot of people, which again takes me back to this idea from a public policy health standpoint that every fast food worker should have paid sick days. That if you're sick, you stay home. And here's the part of this that always comes with this. If you come to work sick, you should be sent home. That's the other part of it. Because I know people, the only time I use my sick days is when I go golfing. And I only know a handful of people like that. Most people, when they're sick, they stay home. And then I'll go to work when I'm sick, because where else will I be? Not a good idea if you're a food service worker, according to the CDC. What they say is 1 in 5 food service workers say they have worked while sick. Do we really want that? I find that number to be really low. 1 in 5. I would have to say it's considerably higher than that. Now, the way they say to prevent the infections via restaurants and catering businesses is for people to wash their hands thoroughly with soap and water, and to stay home for at least 48 hours after the symptoms have stopped. That's a bit unrealistic, but I do like the idea of making sure that folks have paid sick days and the ability, once they are sick, and the ability to stay home. And that just seems, because I don't want to get sick. I know you don't. But I know, Rick, I know we can't afford it. It's just too expensive to give people paid sick days. I think I'll pay the extra 10 cents for a burger, or the extra 10 cents for whatever it is, to make sure that that person handing me whatever it is. Because how many times have you gone to a restaurant and you see somebody sniffling or blowing their nose? You start going, wait a second, I don't want whatever you got. I don't want. I went to a McDonald's not too long ago. Woman had all up her arm some kind of psoriasis, and I'm going, really? I don't think I want you touching my food. We should be thinking about that. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The app, got to get the app. Sign up for the app, the Rick Smith Show, on your Google Play or iTunes account. This way you always have it. It's always there. I appreciate you being here. Look forward to tomorrow. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is colored to the USA.